The United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Start with county.
Thank you, Rita. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I'll call to order the County Commissioners meeting for February 19, 2020. The announcements, County Commissioners meeting is being audio and video recorded. Is there any public comment tonight on the County Commissioners meeting? Okay, seeing none. No new business I know of. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes and payroll and treasury warrants? Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. So we'll take it. Table the minutes. Can you get approval of the payroll and treasury warrants?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries. Official business request to formally name Road Lot 80 off Tacoma Way as Waite Drive. Is there any questions? You have a review or?
As you all know, the board a couple of years ago had laid out Road Lot 80, which is to serve the Six Fairgrounds or Tacoma Green project, as well as the lots all along the roadway. At the time that the road was laid out, the county commissioners did not formally name the road. Its working name has been Waite Drive in deference to an early owner of the property, William Waite. And I believe that residences along the road, a couple of Habitat homes, one in particular, the first one off of Tacoma, it is the emergency address, Waite is being used in that, is my understanding. So we just would like to formalize this at this point.
Okay. Questions, comments, motion?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
A question: Are we setting the layout or just the name?
You already laid it out.
Okay, because one thought I had. So let's finish this, and I'll talk about it.
Okay, so all those in favor?
Yeah. Okay. Naming.
Was that 4-0?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any other comments?
Yeah, a couple of comments. And I joked about Vorse Drive back when we had it. I saw the minutes, and I remembered that. And we bought a property on the backside that will serve as a cut through. So I'm wondering, before we actually start building the road, I think we should be thinking about, do we want a cul-de-sac, or do we actually want to start thinking about the connections through? What's that? All right, good. So as long as we're talking about that, I just hope we don't go ahead because it's a cul-de-sac there and make a cul-de-sac when the better planning option is to get more connectivity and more options in and out of various properties. So that sort of jumped out at me.
We've been waiting for the survey for months now. We finally have received it, and it's under review with Public Works. So at some point, I think we'll be getting to you with where we are.
Right.
And that type of thing can be brought up then.
Yeah, that would be great. And because if the public doesn't know, we did buy a property a couple away from that, which will enable a cut through to Amelia. There's a cut through here. So I just think there's a couple other options we should be looking at that were not necessarily in place when this was done. So, okay. And then my only other comments on the county minutes was that we didn't approve them. Okay, we'll wait to that then.
Okay.
Those minutes were prior minutes.
Oh,
They've
exactly.
already been approved.
Yeah, so
2016.
yeah, the private ones that were there before, I just want to point out there was a 4-1 vote. I was, of course, the one against it, and it was talking about betterments on Surfside Road. I brought that up. I think Rick and I brought that up back then, and it wasn't covered. But if we had bettered some of that, we would have more money and be further along on some of our projects now. So I just want this board and future boards to not look at betterments as a bad word or a bad thing. Betterments can help us get a lot of the stuff we have to do done quicker and share the cost among people who have already, the lack of that charge is already built into their property. So I just, want to bring that up.
Mm-hmm.
Christy, read any
No,
else there?
I don't have anything now.
Commissioner reports or comments?
None?
Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Over to you, Rita.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the February 19th, 2020 Select Board meeting. I believe the only change to the agenda is item 2 under real estate items is being tabled. Other than that, the agenda is the same. So announcements.
This meeting is being video and audio recorded. The month of February, seniors ride the wave for free every Wednesday. There's no select board meeting next week. And we have a very special guest in our audience who is going to give us two very special guests, sorry. They are going to give us a legislative update, Representative Dylan Fernandes and Senator Julian Cyr.
All right, Dylan went first at Rotary, so I'll go first now. Good evening, Julian Cyr. Great to be with all of you folks. And also we've got a semi-full audience. So Dylan and I have been on island today. We joined the Rotary Club for lunch. We got a tour of your gleaming new fire station, which should be the envy of, I think, every municipality. And had some meetings. I met today with some folks from Fairwinds talking about a mental health legislation we just passed. Actually had a meeting with the chamber. One of your board members and I have spent, I think, 3 meetings together today. The Nantucket Chamber convened a meeting of restaurateurs. We have a restaurant promotion commission that's looking at how to support restaurants. Actually, two of your select board members were there at that meeting, and then now we're here with you folks. It is a busy time in the legislature. We are in the final 5 months of our 2-year legislative sessions. So that means we've been very busy with a number of things we've gotten done, and there's a number of pieces to come all before July 31st. Landmark education bill with significant changes to the Chapter 70 formula was signed into law this fall. Very, very significant. The big pieces for Nantucket are going to be increased dollars for English language learners, which is huge for you guys. More resources around special education, social emotional learning. Both of our chambers have taken up significant climate change policy. The Senate passed arguably the most expansive law in what would be the most expansive law in the country in January, putting the state on a target to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And then I've personally been spending a lot of time working on mental health legislation. Senate President Karen Spilka, her number one personal priority is to see transformation of mental health. I've spent the last year about working on this issue. I'm the Senate chair of the Joint Committee on Mental Health, Substance Use, and Recovery. Just last Thursday, the Senate took up and passed a comprehensive piece of legislation that I was the primary author of. Pretty significant components around parity. So this is the making sure that benefits for mental health are equivalent to benefits for medical, surgical, or physical health. Looking at how do we build workforce that we need for mental health and also access to care. There's a number of issues that are going to make a big difference on Nantucket, from increasing a new licensure level for mid-level practitioners, which will make a difference for services on the island, allowing for same-day billing. There's actually a chunk of language around how the Commonwealth does procurements and contracts, that they have to take into account the needs of geographically isolated and rural communities. You all know it just costs so much more to do business here. That needs to be reflected in our contracting for these services. So it's a pretty significant piece of legislation. We're hopeful we can get it through the House. There's more to come. I expect both chambers will be taking up legislation around housing, which this board has been awesome about. Dylan will talk a little bit more about how Nantucket sort of led the way here on this. And likely transportation is going to be in the mix. Dylan and I are sort of working hard to make sure when we talk about transportation at the state level, people are just not thinking, roads and bridges and sort of big freeways that are far off island, far off Cape, but that we're looking at water travel. Closer to home, we've been working on a number of pieces of legislation. The one piece that I want to talk about today is it's Senate Bill 445 and House Bill House Bill 777. This is the mobile gear legislation that has come before like a home rule from town meeting. I believe you folks have passed it in that way. And so I have a long email from my staff that I haven't really read, but we have some follow-up questions for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Dylan. I'm going to read the email, and then we're going to get back to mobile gear. I think we'll just give a quick, continue our update, and then glad to get into questions.
Great. Pleasure. Congratulations on the baby.
Thank you.
Incredible. So I'm Dylan Fernandez, state rep for Nantucket. Very fortunate to share the island with our wonderful senator, who's here quite often. So to echo Julian's comments, there's a few things that the House has taken up this session. We passed Greenworks legislation, which is all about coastal resiliency and reducing our carbon footprint. And it's designed to funnel money through local municipalities in order to do that. So the Senate is actually looking like it's getting picked up in the Senate. They're revisiting. I just got a news alert on it. So this is something that's very likely to move forward and get passed in the law, but the House already passed this. So this would be funding for municipalities to electrify their vehicle fleets, to hire an energy coordinator. You guys already have one, but perhaps that could be funded through state funding now if this gets passed. Funding for things like microgrids and the like to improve towns' energy efficiency. So more to come on that once that gets passed and signed into law. But it looks like if it does, there'll be a lot of opportunities for the town of Nantucket and towns across the state to tap into that state funding to become more to reduce our carbon footprint. And then also there's funding in there for adaptation. So things around coastal resiliency and the like. The other piece Julian alluded to that I'll talk about is around housing. So Nantucket has for years and years filed a home rule petition, the one that we love so much, and Nantucket does love its home rule petitions, but this one I particularly love that sets a transfer fee of 0.5% on home sales over $2 million. And so this is something that you guys have sent to the state on multiple occasions. It has always died, and it's died in various forms at the state level. And so that's at least in part because of strong opposition from the Realtors Association. So, this session, instead of just trying to get Nantucket's piece through, I filed statewide enabling legislation for every single municipality across the Commonwealth to do what Nantucket wants to do, set the threshold at $1 million, but enabled local municipalities to go higher than that. So you could go to 2 or 3 or 5 million and set the percentage of anywhere between 0.5 and 2% and set the AMI restriction at 175, which is pretty consistent with what Nantucket wants and what other really high cost communities want as well. And this is really, I'm really excited to say this is taken off quite a bit. And so we have a group of, we started a coalition behind this. And so we have a group of around 50 or 60 housing organizations from all over the state that are very much involved in this. And then we've been working with municipalities and their legislative leaders to get more home rule petitions filed and passed on this. And also to get legislators involved from communities that have passed similar home rule petitions, because you guys were the first. You led the entire state on this. And I think you guys should be proud for a lot of your really creative housing ideas that you've come up with on Nantucket. I think municipalities from across the Commonwealth look to Nantucket in a lot of ways, and they certainly did on this transfer fee piece. And so now 6 or 7 communities from across the Commonwealth have filed home rule petitions. You have Julian's neck of the woods of Truro and Provincetown filing, but then the second actor was Somerville. And now Brookline has filed one, Concord has filed one, and the latest filer, which we're really excited about, is Boston, filed a home rule petition on this as well. And so we've been pushing really hard with legislators, council members on the Boston City Council as well to enact this statewide enabling legislation that we are currently iterating on in the House, and the Senate's going to be working on it in a bit as well. So I think, it's really exciting to see kind of how far we've come with this and how many organizations we brought on. We are going to be taking up housing legislation this year. It's going to be, the baseline is going to be similar to the governor's proposal, which is very zoning focused and frankly doesn't meet the need in these really high cost communities like Nantucket, the Vineyard, the Cape, but also, the Boston, greater Boston communities and the Pioneer Valley communities that also, they're not nearly at the home prices that you guys are at, but they're in a massive housing crisis. And so making sure that we can bring as many stakeholders and legislators from across the Commonwealth to support what originally was a Nantucket idea has been probably the highlight of this session. So we're hoping to get this into the housing bill that either goes through the House or the Senate. There's still a ton of work that needs to be done on that, but that's where we're at with that. I guess since we're in the police station, I'd say that we'd pass hands-free driving legislation. We passed hands-free driving legislation now.
Tuesday, right?
Yeah, so right now you're in a grace period. I think next week you can start getting pulled over for using your cell phone while driving. So don't do that. Before you could only texting and driving was banned, but of course, that was really unenforceable because you could use other things with your hands on your phone, like your GPS or make phone calls. Now all of that will be banned, and you have to get a hands-free system in your car. A lot of the newer model cars have a hands-free system, and for older model cars, the technology is really cheap now to put it in your car. So we didn't look at this as something overly burdensome to low-income people. On the home rule petition front, we've passed seven Nantucket pieces of legislation in the past 3 years, which that's definitely more than any other municipality in the Commonwealth, probably by a factor of 2 or 3. But it's wonderful, and we got the home rule petition on the gender neutrality piece for now the select board rather than the selectmen, which is a really important piece, and I just think it's really cool that for the first time in Nantucket's history, you have more women serving on the select board in a municipality that has a pretty storied and long history in this Commonwealth. So I think that's really cool. And then I think to match that with the select board name change was a really good thing that you guys did, and we're able to get done as well at the state level. There's a couple other petitions that you guys sent up, one on a water merger that went through many iterations last session, and there's been a lot of back and forth between council at the State House and town council, and because the language needs to be tweaked quite a bit, we're hopeful that can get done this session. It's really not a massive change you're asking for. It's really just about making sure the language is exactly correct so that we're not coming back here in a couple of years to iterate on that as well. There's a housing covenants piece that you sent out that never made it through committee last session, but happy to report that got reported favorably this session out of the housing committee. So we're at least a step forward, and that's experienced more progress than we had last session. So with that, I think we'll just take some questions unless you want to add anything. And the money piece, we continue to be very supportive of the shellfishing industry on Nantucket. Around $250,000 in the past 3 years to support that. We're going to keep supporting off-island transportation as long as you guys keep requesting that. So around $150,000, I think, all time for off-island transportation, for healthcare services, for the most needy people to get the care that they need and care that they can't already receive here on island. And just keep us, we have great relationships and you guys all have our cell phone numbers. But please just keep us in mind with anything that comes up that we can be supportive and helpful on. We are very much here to serve you and to serve the residents of the town. And that goes to anyone in the audience as well. Know that our offices are here for you. And my email is, just Google my name. My email pops right up that I check religiously, unfortunately. And we get back to you almost immediately. So with that, you want to give the update and then next question?
On the mobile gear piece, so we're trying to make some progress on this. There's been some initial, I think to make some progress truly in getting this bill further advanced, I think we have to double down on our legal rationale for this. And I think that there was a legal justification that someone named Jeff Carlson had worked on. I think it's a start, but we're likely going to need more from town council to make the justification there. DMF, the Division of Marine Fisheries, is kind of pushing back on their authority. But I think there is some precedent. If you look at actually some of the negotiations that have happened around the Muskegon Channel and how Edgartown is sort of pushed their authority and on a separate, this is related to the Vineyard Wind project, that could be a model. So we're going to continue to work on this issue, but I think we'll need to sort of double down on the legal justification there. It's one that continues to be on the list. Also, I just want to applaud the select board and thank you folks for pulling together. I understand there's going to be a working group to look at the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund. You all will recall this is a newly created fund that was established as part of the short-term room occupancy legislation. It's already making a pretty significant impact on Cape Cod. So all the 15 Cape Cod towns are automatically in. It's raised over $9 million in its first 5 months. It's pretty significant dollars there, it's projected to continue apace. So I'm just glad the town is sort of looking at it. Dylan and I sort of fought hard, both for Nantucket and then the 6 towns on Martha's Vineyard, to have the ability to opt into this fund if they want. So I think it makes some good sense that you folks are taking a deep dive there. Any assistance you need from either our offices, the Department of Revenue, the Department of Environmental Protection, let us know. It's meant to be a tool to be used at your disposal if you see fit. So I think with that, glad to take any questions. I'm sure there's a myriad of things we left out. One of the best parts about this job is you never get bored. Because we're always dealing with different issues. We've got more work to do with you folks, particularly on helping get folks get off island who need psychiatric care. We continue to work on that. There's a myriad of issues that we collaborate with Libby and her staff on. And again, it's just great to have Dylan as a partner and to be here with all of you. So glad to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. And thank you for fighting for our home rule petitions. Any questions from the board? Yeah.
Lieutenant Governor Polito put out $3 million against domestic violence in January, or she announced it. What is the process of that? Does that have to go through lots of different things before it trickles down to the Cape and Islands? How does that work? Was it just in task force mode?
So I believe it's either going to be a grant program where they announce the grants, or there's going to be like an RFP process where you can apply for them. Okay. I don't know the answer, but we'll find out and we'll get it to you. My assumption usually when they announce funds like that is either they're saying, hey, there's a grant opportunity, apply for this, or we're announcing the grants of what have they been received by. Right. Local health, I think anytime we can get more resources to local health is really critical and important. They do a whole host of really important work.
Thank you.
And let us know too so we can get more information on it, but then if you do apply, let us know so we can reach out and write a letter of support on the town's behalf.
Thank you.
Yeah,
just
Matt?
a general question on the housing, home rule that everyone's picking up. Is there any need are there any lobbyists? I know there'll be lobbyists on the side of real estate and those interests. Are there any lobbyists sort of helping on the other side? Or are you guys the lobbyists for us?
It's quite the organization now. We are always open to more lobbyists on our side. So So look, you have Mark Drayson, who's a former state representative who actually was in the speaker's class, who's been very helpful in lobbying for us. You have these really large housing organizations and the Metro Area Planning Council that's been a part of this. The MACDC is a part of this. The Boston Tenants Organization, some actually really large organizations. The Institute for Policy Studies is one of our biggest organizations that's doing a deep dive into all the research on exactly how much revenue this would produce for targeted municipalities based on different meetings with reps we're having. So I can go in and give them a sheet of paper and say, this is exactly how much, your communities and you name the town are going to make from this. And so, look, there's a lot of people involved, and it's taken a ton of work to get them to bring everyone in. But we're always looking for more help. I also want to point out that you guys have been really involved and supportive, and Tucker, I see Kempo Grand, have been up at the State House, pushing on Nantucket's behalf on this, and really also pushing for this to be enacted in statewide as well. So you guys have been great partners in this, but as much help as we can get, because we still have a long road ahead, because this is a really large change. It is something that is a new revenue stream, and anytime you're creating something like that, there's going to be a significant amount of opposition. I do think that we have the moral high ground here. When you look at Nantucket, was featured today on my drive to the boat, was listening to a Nantucket story on BUR about an individual who's paying 90% of their salary to rent. That's insane. And I think unconscionable. And so if we are imposing a tiny fee on million or multi-million-dollar home sales, people buying their second, maybe third home, right, to pay for workforce housing, so that we have the teachers, police officers, bartenders, landscapers, everyone that makes the island run and different communities run. I think that's absolutely the moral thing to do. And so I think we're certainly on the right side morally here. And now we need to just, continue to build the political will to do it.
I really want to applaud this board and this town. I represent 20 communities in this region. I would argue that housing is the immediate crisis we face. We have an existential longer-term crisis with the climate emergency. No town more than Nantucket, with maybe a slight asterisk to say Provincetown close behind, has done more on housing. Most of the communities I represent have their heads in the sand, literally, about the crisis we face, what this means for our community, and the viability of whether or not these are viable places to live. That's being called into question around what's happening and who can live in our communities, and that's tied to housing, and that's happening way sooner than what's happening from a climate perspective. And so I just really want to applaud this board for really the vision you folks have had, for pushing the envelope to the broader townspeople at town meeting, for the real commitment. There's no town in the state. There's no town in the state that has a steeper problem than Nantucket, but no town has done more, and I think that's really something that makes the difference. And it's why you're giving the proposals and the tools and the ideas that you have are being exported not only elsewhere in my district, but elsewhere in the state. And so I just, as someone who comes out of this generation of Cape Codders and Islanders who are trying to make a life here, who are trying to give back and trying to make this a sustainable place, just thank you for each of your commitment to this. It's making a difference.
Christy?
Yeah, I was just going to make more of a comment to thank you guys for pushing it forward. I know that Governor Baker has put forward a lot of housing policies, but they're really focused on zoning, and what we really need is a funding source. So this transfer fee is really what we need as our tool in our toolkit. So thank you.
I just had a question sort of tagging onto the housing. I think 40B legislation has been the fire that we needed to focus on this, but I think in seasonal communities, it's the relevance, it's sort of outdated. And I'm wondering if there's ever any conversation about a revision or the next iteration of something like a 40B, because it served a purpose. But again, both of you coming from seasonal communities, I think where you have the turnover, I just think the 25% affordable housing in some of these projects, it just doesn't really, the numbers don't really work for us. So I'm just wondering if there's ever any discussion or if that's really considered, it's done.
So there's always discussion, and among certain folks, there's always a desire to sort of open up and look at 40B. 40B is essentially designed, right, statutorily to be a tough pill to swallow. I would say actually that 40B has not been, broadly across the Commonwealth, has not been very effective in getting more affordable housing, but it's sort of one of the only tools that we've got to actually finance these projects. I think for Nantucket, you folks are getting so close to getting to your 10% that this is no longer, you're going to reach safe harbor, my understanding is, very soon, within the next several years. So whereas I'll be honest, there's not an appetite to open up 40B because we just think it's going to be this whole myriad of issues, and I don't think it's going to be successful. And honestly, I think we need to take other policies that are advancing housing production, that yes, are getting at zoning reform, and that 40B, frankly, was designed to be the sort of poison pill that it is, right? Yeah. And I know there's huge issues with that, and I filed legislation that tries to look at saying, all right, how do we look at the state housing index differently? How do we just have things that fit for seasonal communities? And even, in the bill I filed, which is called an act relative to attainable housing in seasonal communities, 11 ideas that are meant to make a difference for our communities. Most of them are pretty non-controversial, right? Ideas about, all right, let's give, if you're a landlord who's renting at affordable rates, you should get a property tax break for that, for the local option. How do we provide more tools for the Department of Housing and Community Development to work with municipalities or school districts in buying housing? How can towns maybe have right of first refusal in foreclosed properties? One of the components in there was actually looking at the state, what's called the SHI list, the state housing index list, and basically that's what counts to sort of your 10%. One of the ideas that is in this bill was about how do we count covenant housing? Do we give some credits to municipalities, for instance, that are investing in another town's project, right? So Truro giving some CPA funds to a project in Eastham, can that count? And that actually, in a redraft of the bill that moved out of the Housing Committee, the Housing Committee would not advance the bill with any language touching the state housing index. So there's a real pushback in the Housing Committee around doing anything around 40B. I think from Nantucket's, for your perspective, and I know there's been a lot of, very legitimate concern around certain 40B projects. I think recent ones here. I think for Nantucket's purposes, you folks just keep steaming ahead, and you're going to be in safe harbor. But for the other communities I represent in my hometown, which is 2% affordable housing, I worry that. The reason why folks don't want to open up 40B is most municipalities are nowhere even near close to their 10%. And so that's why I think there's just such a desire not to open it up. If anything, Nantucket, you folks have been so on the cutting edge of a lot of this stuff that I think hopefully this is no longer going to be a factor for you moving forward. But I very much sort of appreciate that, some of these developments that are happening that are sort of gargantuan in scale, are hiding behind sort of this 25% for affordable housing, when really, I'd like to see, a town be able to mandate, all right, you're going to do this, you need to do 35%, you need to do 50%, allow them to sort of go further. But I think the example from the bill that I told was, that the bill that I filed was just, there is not a desire among, housing policy folks to open this up, largely because it hasn't really built. Aside from Nantucket and like a handful of other towns, no one is even close to their 10%. Maybe, I don't know who else is, but I think that's kind of part of the reason why it's like, we're leaving it alone. But I hear the critique of it. I agree with the critique of it. But yeah, I think in legislation, you got to know where you can push and you can get some traction and not. And I think that Dylan and I need to be focused on getting the transfer fee tax passed either as part of a home rule or as broader legislation and a whole host of other pieces that are going to make a difference for you guys.
Thank you. I just have two other quick questions. Wind, there isn't much that we can do until it changes at the federal level. Is that correct?
Oh, with wind. Oh.
Yeah, with the wind projects.
Yeah. So to piggyback off Julian, I talk about 40B when talking about the transfer fee, right? Because transfer fee is very municipality focused, and it's all about, allowing local communities, Nantucket, to hit its 10%, but on its own terms, in a way that meets the community aesthetic and the way that the community wants to do it, without having, to build all these other units. So I've actually found it kind of useful in talking to legislators to bring up how the transfer fee would let communities hit their 10% on their own terms. So wind, there's certainly nothing good to report here. I think, what?
Well, no, just
Okay. So there's certainly nothing good to report here. Frankly, as long as Donald Trump is president of the United States, I think there's going to be continued hold up to this $2 billion project. That's been clear since everything. So the previous Secretary Zinke, was very much pro offshore wind development. He made glowing comments about offshore wind development, and everything was running really smoothly until the president, until he ran into all these ethics issues, and then the president appointed Secretary Bernhardt to replace him, who I believe his background is in the kind of oil and gas and fossil fuel industry. And since that transition, you've seen the president make a lot of just crazy, frankly, comments about offshore wind and wind in general. So those are all very YouTubeable. I won't get into them. But it's my sense that, they're holding this up because of an environmental impact study, where the same year they green-lighted seismic blasting for oil exploration along the Atlantic coast. So that's not the reason, right? Clearly, and frankly, elections have consequences, and I think as long as that president remains in the White House, there's going to be some excuse on top of another excuse to hold up clean energy production. This is terrible for terrible for us hitting our clean energy goals. The Commonwealth needs offshore wind in order to hit our clean energy goals, especially with Pilgrim Power Plant coming offline. And this is also really, a terrible situation for economic investment in clean energy. I mean, this is a project, a $2 billion project. There are jobs projected in our district here, and there's actually projects underway right now to build facilities on the vineyard and across the district to support this project. So that is kind of, I don't know that there's anything on the state level that can be done. We have conversations with our federal delegation on this, and Senator Markey, Senator Warren, Representative Keating have all been very vocal in trying to get them to have, really trying to get them to have the same environmental guidance for offshore wind projects that they just have in oil and natural gas projects on the coast. For some reason, they scrutinize clean energy more from an environmental perspective than they do dirty energy. It's quite backwards, but frankly, I think as long as Trump's president, that's going to be the status quo.
The sole bright spot is in the latest procurement that's come on with the Mayflower Wind. The project's coming in at about, I think it's $5.37 a kilowatt hour. It's like even lower than Vineyard Wind. So the market is responding to this. This is going to happen. This is going to be a game changer for the Commonwealth getting to net zero carbon emissions. And it's just a matter of, how long does this failed administration remain in office? Most reasonable people, I expect, are hoping that it's not long.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, we're good. Thank you both for the update. Really appreciate it. Thanks. Take care. So we are moving on to the public comment portion of the agenda. If there's anyone who has any comment on anything that is not on the agenda, please come to the microphones. Not seeing any. There's no new business. So we'll move on to the approval of warrants.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And next we have approval of pending contracts.
I wanted to bring one to your attention. It's the last one on the chart there. It's kind of in bold. It's a purchase agreement with Kelly and Ryan Associates, Inc. This is for the technology items needed for the increased parking enforcement for this summer. They are not necessarily related to the paid parking aspect of this program, as the board has agreed to hold off on that until we can see how increased parking enforcement will work over this coming summer. So this will include, this is basically a system. Chief, correct me if I'm saying anything wrong, but it's basically a system that involves software, equipment, including handheld license plate readers, and I'm not sure what else there is, permitting software, so that people will be able to get some of the, will be able to get residential parking permit online, and those types of things that will help us, again, with increased enforcement going into the summer of 2020.
I had a question on the contract. It says that they will accept payments of tickets by credit card or check, but what about cash? Is that an option?
I don't think so, no. It's not an option now either. Is it?
It's an
It is
option now.
I didn't think that it was. We don't accept cash from most things in the town.
They could put cash in the envelope and mail it. I suppose they would accept that. There will be a drop box somewhere here, probably here at the police station, that they can drop it in. But they'll have to put it in the envelope, just like they do now. But generally, most people write checks and put it in there.
Okay.
And my question on this, does it do the data gathering that we need by street and by vehicle and all that kind of stuff?
It gives us the data, and it creates reports. And if it doesn't give us everything that we think we need, because that's a question, we're not exactly sure what we need, but we know what data it can give us.
Right.
It'll give us the data that we can input somewhere to be able to get the answers that we need.
All right, because that's really important. Does it tell you where your officers were, or what they did, et cetera?
That it does.
Okay.
It'll actually generate a report that'll show where they walked, the tickets or the vehicles they chalked, the vehicles they ticketed, what they ticketed it for, that kind of thing. It just shows us zigzags all over the.
So it shows you, so you can gauge the efficiency of each individual. That's really important on something like this. Okay.
There's no more questions.
Motion to approve contracts.
And the only other question I had with this, because sometimes these guys will own the data, and if you don't continue with them, is this in the cloud, or is this something we're going to actually have control of in the end?
It is in the cloud, but we own the data.
We own the data.
That
So
was a specific question that we had inquired about.
Okay, because we want to make sure we have that. And the only other question I had was training. With these guys, they're all you're happy with their ability to train, and
They'll as soon as the contract's signed, they'll come down, they'll train whoever we're going to have use it, and they'll come back as often as we need.
Okay.
We anticipate we'll have dedicated officers this summer. They'll come back in June and train them on how to use it, and then as we need training, they'll do it.
good.
And I guess I might as well answer the question that was kind of asked but not answered. If we decide to go with paid parking, it's simply adding a module or going out and getting a vendor who offers that service. It integrates into this very easily.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Made a motion.
Oh, I'll second, and just a comment. I thought it was really nice that we're investing in a local family for a police academy. His father was a police officer as well.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 It's unanimous. Okay, moving on to citizen and departmental requests. The Affordable Housing Trust request for authorization to fund Habitat for Humanity.
Tucker Holland, Municipal Housing Director. Thank you for the opportunity. As the board may recall, Habitat has been diligently working on a couple things. One, to modify their process to conform with Department of Housing and Community Development guidelines that would allow their homes going forward to be included on the SHI list that Senator Sear was just talking about, our 10% requirement. And they have worked very hard on this and are basically teed up to have future homes be eligible for inclusion on the SHI list. As the board will recall, the small hurdle to get to that point is they had previously selected 2 families to go into their next 2 units, and those units will not count on the SHI list. So the board had previously had a policy about town-owned land, if it's going to be given toward a project like Six Fairgrounds, for example, all of the units need to qualify on this SHI list. So there's been a little bit of a challenge to have Habitat be in position to house these 2 year-round families and clear the decks, if you will, for their future activity to be included on the SHI. So Habitat has come to the Affordable Housing Trust with the desire to purchase a duplex lot, which would allow them to create homes for these 2 families, clear their list, so to speak, and move forward SHI eligible from there on out. The Affordable Housing Trust met yesterday and is recommending a grant to Habitat for this purpose. I'll mention that Joe Grouse from Habitat is here if there are any Habitat-specific questions.
Just to sort of clarify too, there's no additional costs doing it this way, and that it really expedites the process as the goal for this.
Yes, a grant to Habitat, which is something the trust does routinely, would enable them to move more expeditiously on this project, and they really are anxious to continue the good work that they do.
What percent of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund money does 390,000 represent? You guys are...
It's 375 is the number. And so this money would be coming from the $5 million bonding that the CPC did last year, specifically for this type of purpose. CPC money needs to serve 100% AMI or less. Habitat typically is serving 60% to 80% AMI. And the request with the CPC was specifically to be able to purchase land to be able to facilitate things really exactly like this.
Any other questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's 3-0. Thank you
all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, moving on to real estate items. So number 1 is parcel 33 Central Street, unnamed parcel on Elm Street.
Thank you. Ken Bogran, real estate specialist. Bit of background. There are two real estate matters that are virtually the same. So I will speak in detail on the first one, and then the second one will have the same issues if there are any. By way of background, in 2009, this property that we're dealing with was authorized to be taken and then authorized to be disposed, and nothing has happened on that until most recently. This is part of the yard sale program that has been going on over the last number of years. What's different about this yard sale program is the fact that because of the amount of money that's involved in it, it needed to go through a request for proposal process, because the state statute indicates that when the value is in excess of $35,000, we need to go to an RFP process in terms of publishing the fact that this property is available and seeing whoever is interested in purchasing the property. We did go through this process, and with respect to this property and the other property, there was single request response to the RFP, and in each of the two instances, the response to the RFP was in excess of the minimum bid price. By way of background, what happens with these properties is that the parcel that's involved here, the entire parcel was owned by the owner involved. Because there are streets, those streets are roads that don't count with respect to the property in terms of what is developable. So what was done by the town was to talk to the owners, indicate to them that the town would take the property and then would make it available for reacquisition as a result of the RFP process. And that is what is done. The process was initially reviewed by the Real Estate Assessment Committee, and they made the determination to go forward with this on this basis. That was the initial recommendation that was discussed at the meeting last week, and the board wanted to have some additional information as a result of the fact that two members were not here. So we went back to the Real Estate Assessment Committee. They reviewed the issue with respect to their hearing, and at that hearing, Mr. Atherton, who had raised the issue, was present, as were the counsel for the homeowners that were involved in the process. And the committee once again unanimously recommended moving forward with the disposition of these properties as per the compliance with the RFP. The vote was 4 in favor and 1 abstention. What I should point out is that because of the fact that these strips didn't count towards ground cover in the past, by them purchasing these strips, it does give them some additional ground cover, but it's not significant. It's about 450 to 600 square feet would be what the additional ground cover would be available. I think what's also important to note is that on each of the 3 parcels, only 2 of which are under consideration today, there are existing dwellings on the property. So it is the recommendation of the Real Estate Assessment Committee that I'm bringing forward and recommending that we move forward to proceed with the disposition of these properties. And the disposition proceeds are indicated in the AIS. And this one, it's over $60,000 for this particular one. And I'll get to the amount when we get to the other one. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that might be there.
I guess my first one, if they already own it, why did we have to take it and sell it back to them?
Well, the thing is that in order to be able to get, what they wanted to do was to clear the title with respect to the paper roads. And so that can only be done with the town owning the paper roads. So the town has to take the paper roads in order to acquire them. The transaction at that time was we did not pay any compensation for the taking, because the understanding was that we would then be selling it back to them. The benefit to them was that they would be able to utilize this land to provide some additional ground cover if that was desirable.
No, I understand that. And the problem I have with this whole process, I have a problem with it. And it's because all along we are told as a board that, when it gets to disposition, that's when you decide. When you get to disposition, then you can worry about it. And all along, there are built-in expectations. From the minute the person asks to, for the town to take it so they can build a bigger house, from the minute they start the process to the town meeting, like if you read the way our town council mentioned, it was as authorized. It's like as authorized. Well, when we talk about it at town meeting and anybody stands up and says, geez, I'm concerned about beach access, I'm concerned about the path on that, I'm concerned about anything, what they're told at town meeting every time is nothing to be concerned about. The select board will take care of that at disposition. And then when we get to disposition, what we're told is, well, town meeting authorized it. Nothing to see here. What do we do? And so I think when we start having, when we start sort of taking and reselling and building larger properties near the water and in the critical areas of the island, and some of them that might need drainage and some of them that might have beach access issues and all sorts of things, I don't think that we're really thinking about those through this process. So I get worried when we get here that it's already baked in and there's nothing else we can do. So that's just a general comment about the entire program. I don't think it's being run neighborhood by neighborhood with the best interest of the town residents front and center. I think it's being run, property by property for the benefit of the property owners.
Oh, well.
That's my own opinion.
Okay. I'll just make a comment with respect to what Libby has asked me to do in my new role is with respect to issues that come forward either from the town or from citizens articles is in fact to provide a statement to have an understanding of the impact that they have and the issues that they raise. And so this is the first year I've done that, and I've done that with respect to the town articles and also with respect to the citizens articles, given context to and reports to the FinCom so that there can be recommendations in respect to that. I think that in fairness to this program goes back more than 10 years. And part of the understanding of part of the philosophy behind this is that we had situations where there weren't access to the beach. For instance, a lot of this happened in Surfside and on the South Shore. And what you've seen in a lot of those transactions is that when a pathway was taken, it was done in exchange for a one big beach easement. And the one big beach easement provided access to the beach as well as complete rights to the beach for the citizens. So the concept behind the program, I think, is a valid concept. The issues with respect that you're raising with respect to perhaps some misunderstanding of how it's been applied is a valid concern. And I think that moving forward with the kind of greater disclosure that we're going to have, we're going to avoid as many of those concerns as we can.
Well, I'm not being, and I don't mean to be critical of you. I'm talking about the vision and the whole in totality of this. Yeah. I think that you're trying to to do your best within the situation that we have. I just think it needs to be improved. Speaking of beach access, do we get, in this case, are we getting one beach easement?
You don't need one beach easement because the town owns the entire beach.
I understand, but eventually that entire beach is going to erode, and so this is our opportunity. So are we looking at one big beach easements? Are we looking at hold harmless agreements? Or are they are these people, when this is twice as big 20 years from now and they've got water lapping at their door, are they going to say, well, you have to give me another road? I mean, like, there's things that we could be thinking about and asking about if we're being proactive and looking ahead, knowing what we're facing.
Well, the recommendation is with respect to the disposition and receiving the proceeds.
I understand.
Yeah.
And my point is, I'm bringing up a couple other things that we could be working on, and I've brought these other topics up during other dispositions as well. And so I'm just bringing those up for the public. I'm bringing those up for the fellow board members, and say I think I don't have an issue with this in Tom Nevers, a mile away from the beach or here. But I think there are certain properties that are, that are fronting ponds, fronting the water. We did one in, not to go back to ancient history, but we did one of these where we ended up with an undersized lot on this. Right. And it's the only other question, I'll let someone else talk, but the only other question is you had an abstention. Was that with a did they abstain because they had a conflict, or what was the?
I don't know reason. It was Mr. Barata who abstained. The other four commissioners voted in favor.
Okay, thank you.
He had the choice to, in fact.
So he could have voted.
He could have
just-
voted. He could have voted in opposition, and Mr. Atherton was there and said he understood where we were going and why we were going. I wouldn't say that he agreed with the recommendation, but he was able to participate fully in the discussion.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Oh, yes. Rick?
Good evening. I'd just like to sort of second one thing that Matt did say, and that's that Ken has inherited a situation that's been going on for 10 or 15 years, and that doesn't make it easy for him. But let me just read, because I did comment on this when it came to you before, and after that I ended up getting a copy of the ad that was run, and it just sort of piqued my interest, so we all should read this or understand. The town of Nantucket invites qualified respondents to submit proposals for the purchase of surplus property owned by the town, which has been identified as having inconsequential public purpose. So, if you just read this and forgot the 2-page memo from town council, Vicky Marsh, and a number of points raised in the discussion about paper roads, you would come away, I think, and say, well, the town owns the property and it has value. I think it would have been helpful also in the materials submitted to you that it was made clear the assessed value of the property per square foot. And look at that compared to the amount of money he's paying to acquire clear title to the additional square footage. And while he may only get 7% coverage, the value of the property is likely to reflect an increase because of its size at a significant multiple to the $3, which in effect was paid by the RFP. In other words, everybody knew the upset price was $3, so I expect they bid 3.01 or something close to that. And I think part of that issue was also involved in a piece of property on Lincoln Circle, where $3 per square foot might have been used. I'm not sure of my facts on this one, but the value to the property owner, again, is significantly more than that. Ground cover is one issue, and that enhances the value of the property. So if this property is sold to another party, I think the value of what they're getting is significant. It may not be appropriate in this case, I don't know, but I think that's why you need to think about reviewing the whole yard sale program. Going back to Surfside, a number of the yard sales were well back of the beach. I'm quite familiar with those involved with the paths to the beach in Surfside and the One Big Beach easements. And I just would point out one other thing about those easements, because it's important to one of the other items that's going to come to your attention, which is James Street. In those examples, the One Big Beach easement in Surfside for those parcels encompasses the whole parcel. It doesn't just encompass the width of the way to the beach, which was the mechanism by which the town was able to lever, let's be honest, those properties to granting One Big Beach easements. In the case of James Street right now, the proposal at the moment, the One Big Beach does not encompass the full width of those properties. It encompasses just the small section on James Street itself. So it's not comparable to the way the town has implemented the One Big Beach easement request when it had the opportunity in prior situations. So hopefully you'll take that into consideration. I would suggest in the case of James Street, you start discussions about what's happening there before it comes to you as a given with a recommendation of the committee, because there are a number of significant issues there. Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose if there's no other comments from the board right now, I have concerns similar to Matt. I think that although this is a fairly standard yard sale process, other than the RFP, I do think that increasing the value, so even if it's considered insubstantial ground cover, we're still potentially increasing the value of coastal properties, which I think down the line, if we do have to deal with any kind of erosion, we're now making it more expensive for ourselves in the long run. We're also 450, 500 square feet still does have impact on stormwater, on impervious surfaces, things like that. And I don't think that we have fully considered the impacts and decided what is substantial building or not, because we haven't really had a chance to look at it through our coastal resiliency plan. I think maintaining access on coastal properties is key. And I think that rather than our default being it's a yard sale, it's already in process and authorized, let's just sell it and deal with it later. I think our default should be, let's look at it through the coastal resiliency plan and hold on to the coastal property that we need until we know that we don't need it. So I do think I am concerned about these particular two properties and essentially selling off our access and approving increased ground cover.
Is there other property, there's town property between the beach and this property, and then also to the right, we have town property and land bank property?
You have, with respect to access to the beach, if you're looking at it from Low Beach Road out to the ocean, to the left, you have access down Sewer Beach, and which is less than a quarter of a mile away. And to the right, you have access through where the police barracks are for the summer specials, again, less than a quarter mile away. So you have complete access to the beach on either side of this property. So there's no issue with respect to getting access to the beach. With respect to the issue of access on the beach itself, all of that beach is in fact owned by the town. So there was no benefit to having a one big beach easement in the sense, because in fact, the beach, access to the beach, which is what the one big beach easement was designed to do, to cover the areas where we had private owners, that the citizens couldn't go have access to the beach other than fishing, fouling, and navigation, have access in this area because of the fact that the town owns the property and has no restrictions with respect to what the people can do on those beaches.
Okay.
Just one further comment. I think it would have been helpful in this whole discussion from a few weeks ago to up to now to have a overview, from Google Maps or something of the fuller area. If you didn't take the time to understand where this was and the surrounding properties and who owned them and all of those issues, and you just looked at this map, you might not be aware of the significance of the town-owned property and that it is a beach. It's just not obvious to everybody. So,
I think it might be.
I made those things available to you.
I think it might be helpful in future at some point having the coastal resiliency coordinator weigh in on some of these.
Yeah, I was going to recommend when things like this go through the Real Estate Advisory Committee to also go through the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. I really would have liked to have their input.
So we brought that up with Capcom this year, and coastal resiliency, the CRAC should be involved. And they said they're almost ready, but not quite. I know Matt's on it, but it was Vincent and others were saying they're not ready. We're focused on the plan, and that's the feedback I got when we inquired about them with Capcom.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they can.
It would be premature. And there's a plan being done. There are, but my guess is that that when you read other plans that have been done and look at what people are talking about, I think we are going to have some discussions at some point of how do you address sort of beachfront areas, from a zoning perspective. Is what we're doing right, or should we be doing it differently? What's the best practices for runoff and that type of thing? And then the storm tide pathways that aren't even near the beach, what do we do there? And so, I do think that we're going to, if we want to, be able to address sort of the, the water that's coming, then we're going to have to change how we do things. And it's going to be, and that's going to be kind of the fun part when we get to, you get the plan and the recommendations. But a lot of the recommendations do talk about how do you incentivize not to, build up in these sensitive areas and not to build bigger, not to put more value into these sensitive areas, because it's going to be more difficult to then, sort of retreat or do the things you need to do there to address the water as it comes in. If you look at sort of down at Brant Point, when sort of a lot of stuff that was wetlands when I was a kid is now all built in white in bright lawns. Well, those wetlands are crucial for all the people that live there and people further on, because they were able to suck in all the water when we have those issues. And so as we sort of turn everything into lawns and swimming pools and rock walls and everything, we are taking away our own ability to handle the water that's going to come in. And we're making it more and more difficult. And so there's going to be competing interests. There are going to be, sort of homeowners and developers and future developers that are going to say, geez, I want to do what I want. Will you please fix it for me? But there's going, the rest of us have to say, how are we going to do that? How can we afford that? So, it's further than I'm going too far long, but I just think the main thing here is I think that committee is not ready to do it yet. I think places like this may end up being treated differently if we're smart about it.
And to address Mr. Atherton's point, here is the map, and you can see the green square right there. And it's over 1,000 feet from the edge of that property out to the shore. And all of that is that in the original plan with respect to this, all of that land that is from the green, between the green and the ocean, was originally set up as lots that could be sold. That obviously never happened, and that's all owned by the town. And you can see on the right-hand side of the green is where the old sewer beds were, right there. And there's, to the right of that, is the access from what I call Sewer Beach down to the ocean. And to the left, where you see those two white structures, that's where the police facility barracks are, and you have access to the beach all the way down there. So, there's also, there's also a walkway to the right there. Thanks. That's a walkway that is needed access for people to be able to walk down that to the beach on Cloutier property.
I just wanted to say that I think that it's a good question about what other access points are nearby, but I think I don't think we can necessarily rely on those access points being accessible in perpetuity. And I think we're seeing that with Sconset Bluff, where we don't really know where to put other roads because we don't know where a break might occur. And I think in the future, those access points may or may not exist. So that's where I think at this stage, without review, maintaining all of our options seems to me a more sensible default than to start to get rid of them before we really know if we need them or not.
Yeah, the only other interesting thing is right in front of these properties was the old railroad line. So if you look at on a GIS map, you'll see sort of a long, can we pull that? Yeah, you can do it. Oh, this is like magic. You're like magic. But see right in front? Yeah, that, and if you follow that, that's the old railroad bed. I think it was 100 feet. It's skinnier than that now, but that ran all along here, all the way out to Surfside. Yeah, if you follow it, it goes all the way along. That's all owned by the town right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I'll say we do not sell that.
No.
That cannot be yard sale. I can see people aiming for that now, but, I just think that, who knows what that'll be, but that, that's a huge value to that. So.
And when I look at this, I'm also trying to look at it from the perspective of good governance. And we've, worked with the homeowners to take this by eminent domain and without paying them any damages. And now we're at that process where we're selling it back to them and to kind of change up the way that we're doing the process. Not that we shouldn't change it. I think that might be something that we would want to review before we start going down the path with the homeowner. Just so that everybody's aware, we don't want people to stop working with the town because we're untrustworthy.
So I'll add to that, Christie, on the Real Estate Advisory Committee is advisory committee. We don't have to go with any of their recommendations, but they are there to take this burden off of us and give us suggestions and recommendations. Do we need to help them more focus on certain things like this? Can we not do that? Is there anything we need to change in the future? Because the Real Estate Committee looked at this twice. They brought it back and approved it 2 times in a row. And that doesn't mean we have to approve it tonight. But if we're going to question some of these things that are on the coast, do we need to direct them in a certain way? Or is that through planning? Is that through us?
Yeah, they report to us, so it's through us.
Right, so we can,
So we need to provide them a scope,
what's that?
provide them with a scope of what we want them to look at with each property.
If this keeps coming back with Real Estate Committee, I don't want to keep saying no and not tell them that we'd like to see something different.
I think coastal properties are the key. These are similar questions that we've had on each of the coastal properties, and each time there's more detail added to our question. So I think that for coastal properties, I do think treating them differently. And if REAC needs to look at them differently or needs guidance from a coastal resiliency coordinator, something like that, I do think we should start looking at coastal properties differently. And I agree with you. I'm a bit torn because I think we've gone so far down the road with these homeowners and it's been sort of congenial and amicable to date. But I also think that I agree with Matt that by just approving this, then it sets that precedent so that when it gets looked at again in the future, it's, well, we did it here and it was already authorized, so we'll just do it again and we'll deal with it later. And I think that we have prioritized the Coastal Resiliency Committee and the coordinator, but I think really digging into the details of what we're going to do with coastal properties is, I don't think we can put it off or set precedent that allows us to overlook it for future.
Can I say something? I don't think any of this is precedent setting. The vote is with you. So if you don't want to, if you think there is a precedent, then don't vote it. But everything can be a case by case basis. I jotted down a whole bunch of notes that I was going to email around at a later time, but you might want to think about doing what Rick said, reassess this entire program, have a discussion as to how it's working, what do you want to change, do you want to revisit the criteria, the prioritization, the framework, the role of the REAC group, how the minimum bids are set, hold harmless, run big beach easements, resiliency issues, property valuations. I could go on and on about everything else I jotted down, but this might be even a potential workshop item unless we can clear an agenda some Wednesday night. And one of the other things that Ken and I have spoken about, and Andrew and I as well, is getting a kind of a more easily accessible inventory of the yard sale parcels that have already been approved and that have had action taken on them, so we can kind of understand what has happened so far. That might be a little bit instructive as to a discussion about this, and you could maybe look at a big map and identify what is still, well, we get a list, but what is still out there for remaining yard sale parcels that have not even been acted upon yet. Maybe the board needs to get involved at more frequent points along the way, and they're established in the program. The program probably should be taken a look at. It has been some number of years since it went into effect, and maybe it's time to revisit.
Libby, with it being an RFP, is there any option of tabling this or coming back to it at a later date, or are there deadlines or timelines with an RFP?
I'm not sure quite what the, I don't know if Ken knows, if there's a deadline on the action of the board, or if Brian knows. I'm not sure about that.
No, there's not a deadline with respect to when we have to act, so.
I don't think you want it to linger, though. I think you either want to table it to a date certain with the specific information that you want to see back with it, or just vote it.
And we have one of the owners here.
No. Not that lucky. My name is Jay Maroney. I'm with Steve Cohen's office representing one of the owners. And I just want to say that, I understand that you might have questions with the program now. And what you're talking about now is a fairly serious review of the program. And this has been going on now for 11 years. Property owners have been very patient. They had 2 years or more waiting for the RFP to be revised. And really what's happening here now, it really feels like it's just continuing to move the goalposts. So, I mean, at some point, you have to, allow the process to end for these individual properties. It's 11 years now. And to ask the property owners now, wait another year, wait another 2 years, like, it just seems like what you're saying, Rita, is that you're really kind of kicking them in the teeth. And it's not terribly fair. And it's totally understandable after 11 years to look at the program again and to, maybe some properties that are earlier in the program or haven't been sitting and lingering for this long. But the property owners have been very cooperative. They've done a lot of work, and talked to the town and pushed the town in different ways and try to do it in a very, amicable way. And to now come back and say that we're going to table this for what sounds like a fairly significant review. Just want to say sounds rather, cruel. I mean, I understand it's property and it's not, sending people to jail, but, just want to put that out there.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, thoughts, or motions from the board?
I think I'm leaning towards approving this, but my worry is that we don't do all the things, not pointing to you, Libby, but because we approve it and then nothing happens. If we don't approve it, definitely something will happen because so many things are thrown at us every week, every month, every year. That's my only concern. We would have to really be committed and prioritize it to staff that this is what we want and what's going to come off their
Yeah, but if I, as the town real estate specialist and the staff person to REAC, gets the direction from the board with respect to doing this, then that's my job to make sure that gets implemented.
I think one of the things Libby said, how many people have expectations? What are their expectations? If we're going to change the program, are we grandfathering in 2 people or 200?
My thing is I think that if no process has been started with respect to the individual properties other than the authorization at town meeting, when that property comes forward, it's looked at under what the rules and the guidelines of the Real Estate Assessment Committee's rules and regulations are at that point in time. I mean,
But that doesn't answer the question. How many are in process? Do we have 2 in process or do we have 200? And what step are they in the process?
I'm not aware of any that are in process other than the ones that are in front of you right now, other than the issue with respect to James Street that Mr. Atherton was talking about before.
So when we're done with James Street, there's no more yard sales?
No, I think that there are a number of town meeting warrant articles that have been given the authorization that you have talked about, but they haven't moved forward yet.
Right.
Nothing has happened with them.
And so what needs to be done is those need to be looked at to find out which of the ones that are out there and what properties do they relate to, so that we can have an understanding of what the potential is.
You still have some that are stuck in land court.
Right.
And some that we've granted licenses to, which we haven't conveyed, with the understanding that we will convey them in the future. So there are items outstanding.
Right. And I'd just like to know, that would be one of the things. I pushed hard for the real estate committee partly because I felt like I've been snookered 3 or 4 times. So I was hoping not to be snookered. I was hoping, that we would find a way to vet these so that the town's, the public's, interests were better served. And, so that's still my goal. So.
And I think that's what the Real Estate Advisory Committee is doing under the conditions that they've been given so far.
But I don't think they've been, that's part, we have to clarify what conditions they've been given. They've made the conditions. So I think Libby's suggestion is right, to have them come in, explain what they're doing now, how do they vet them, how is it filed, what's the information they receive. Some of the mistakes that we made early on, and I think they have too, is they didn't even have a map. We didn't even have a map. You know, I voted for one that was 2 parcels as though it was one, and only found out later that it was 2 parcels that we sold for about half price, a little more than half price. And so that kind of stuff is what led to the real estate committee. And I think that is, you know, our job is, you know, is to be the, you know, the gatekeeper for this.
Well, I can attest that the material that comes forward to the committee includes an incredible amount of detail with respect to each of the properties, with respect to maps, photos, and whatnot. And if there are questions with respect to it, it gets sent back to be reviewed for the additional information, at least during the period of time that I've been involved since April. So.
No, and I would say, what I know, it's improved quite a bit. I'm not.
Madam Chair, take a motion to see where we're at.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve this with the direction to the town manager, to Ken, to kind of what you reviewed and start the process of reviewing REAC and with coastal properties.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'll second and add that the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee be added to that list when they're ready.
Can I just comment? This is very vague here. We need direction from you all about where you want this program to go. So I'm not totally clear what you're asking. You're asking us to talk with REAC and find out what their criteria is, and then eventually the Coastal Resiliency Committee? I'm not really sure what you want.
I think I want to understand the process of how they're evaluating properties, especially ones that are near the coast. And if they have a checklist, if it's near the coast, how is the Coastal Resiliency Coordinator or Committee weighing in on those properties?
Can they?
Yeah, can they?
They're not right now.
Right.
I think the question that I have that makes it difficult to vote for this one is, what is the appropriate action for coastal properties as regards the yard sale program? And someone at least taking into consideration access, one big beach, ground cover. I just think, again, with coastal properties, they need to be looked at differently. And if that's the coordinator, if it's a recommendation from the coordinator, or a review by the committee, either one, but just knowing that someone looked at it with a lot of things that you mentioned in mind.
Is that, because those are the criteria that Real Estate Assessment Committee already looks at, is the point that you're making is that they should have input from the Coastal Resiliency Coordinator on those same issues?
Yes, I think they should have.
I'm just trying to get clarification in terms of the process that you want to have established.
I would like, when it's coastal properties, I would like to see the Coastal Resiliency Coordinator and or the committee, but keeping it simple, the coordinator providing a recommendation on the properties. And I think the problem is, in order to do that, we probably need to finish the Coastal Resiliency Plan. So again, I just don't think it's a lens. It doesn't seem it's a lens that we've been looking at these properties through. It's come up every time we have a coastal property in the last year and a half, I would say. Matt or someone has brought up that we've got access issues, we've got ground cover, we've got stormwater, and I think we need to have someone else looking at that.
Well, fair comment, but again, with respect to the issues you just made, access is clearly something that REAC looks at because of the fact that it was important to make sure that if you did this, you still had the appropriate access to the beach that the public would be able to get to the beach by taking away these paper roads. And so as we looked at that, you had two major signs of access, and you also had the ability for the public to be able to use the beach. So those issues were not as important in terms of, because of the very fact that they were addressed through the physical layout of the particular property.
And then I guess the other one is the appropriateness of ground cover, increasing ground cover in coastal properties.
And that, again, is part of the report that we made because it's included in my AIS with respect to these properties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I'm not. It's in the report and it's reported, but I'm not sure that anyone has looked at, what is the impact, on the watershed, harbor watershed of larger buildings. What is the impact of more hardscape? We all know that it's bad, but we don't know what the extent of it is. I guess I have a question just for the attorney, is would your client be adverse to a one big beach easement on this property? Seeing as it's 1,000 feet away, it'll never happen, is he adverse to putting that on there?
I don't think he was ever asked. I don't think he would be opposed, no.
Because I'd be more likely to vote for it if that was on the property. So if you want to get 3 votes, I would do it if, for both of these, and then we're taking the long view, and if and when that ever happens, it's a long time away, maybe not in your lifetime or my lifetime, but then we're taking the long view and we're getting, that if it happens.
That could be your approval condition, and then they make the determination as to
If they
these 2
wanted-
properties
Yeah.
and the other one
Matt,
when it comes back in March.
Do you want to make an amendment to the motion?
I'll make an amendment that if it be approved, a one big beach easement on this be,
In addition to the consideration provided
Yes.
pursuant to the RFP, that there also be a one big beach easement granted by the owners to the town.
All right, maybe I can, I'll just rescind the motion, we'll start over.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Eric, you're looking at me like I don't know what's.
yeah, move approval with what he said, because it sounded really intelligent.
So I'll rescind that.
And you are making a new motion? This is gonna affect him too, he's the next one.
I know, so let him speak.
So Brian Swain, I represent the 2 abutting parcels. And I'm glad everyone was talking policy, and a lot of the issues were brought forward about the program and what it needs to be looked at or reevaluated. I can't speak for my client about the big beach easement. That was never part of the RFP, so I don't know how that plays into disposing of it after it was put out to bid publicly and done. So not sure how Jay's client would feel about that, but just a comment on if you were to make a motion in that regard, would the big beach easement be encumbering the land right away where people could walk through people's backyards, or is that only if the water recedes up
It would
to X amount of feet?
it would be springing and only happen if the water receded up to the, if the rack line ended up at their property.
Okay.
They're 1,000 feet away. It's only if that happens.
Okay.
That's that was the intent of them. So
Yeah. And I'm just not sure you can actually add those kind of terms since the RFP has already been out and responded to. I think you're changing the terms of a contract that you've already made.
Okay. Brian,
that's
do you have
illegal.
Brian has a comment on this.
We can't condition the sale on a one big beach easement because
Okay.
it was not part of the requirement when we put the bid out, the proposal out. So
Okay.
changing it to do that would not be something that we could do at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
all right, thanks.
All right, so
We're back to your motion.
yeah.
So I'll make a motion to approve. And I think the other direction that we can send to Ken and town admin can be separate afterwards. So just a motion, straight up motion to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those against?
No.
No.
Sorry, you voted no too?
I did.
Voted 2-2?
Yeah.
So it doesn't pass.
It doesn't pass.
So do we want to bring it back when Dawn's here and?
The RFPs, you can ask Brian, but the RFP
Right.
is void, null and void.
Not necessarily.
You could table to when you have a full board.
Yeah, that's the only,
After we've already voted.
So,
Someone who voted in favor could ask to reconsider the vote.
but it could just go on an agenda again. Why wouldn't it be able to do that?
If there's no timeline on the RFP,
Right.
then it could come back at another agenda with a full board, which I think I'm okay with. But I think does someone else have to? Someone who voted yes.
I'll make a motion to bring it back when we have a full board.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Aye.
Is that unanimous?
Yes.
Then I assume that's the same motion for the next item on the agenda?
Yes.
Can we just finish this one first?
Yep.
Who seconded that motion to bring it back?
Matt?
And did you want to make a motion as regards to the direction for, as regards hold harmless or?
I was putting on my motion to try to get it passed.
Yeah.
To throw you guys a bone, so you guys can make a motion on what you want to see react to or CRAC.
So, and I'll speak on that point. That's that's difficult. Like when we like, how do I do it? When you say, well, just what do you want? It's what my employees do when they don't want to do something. Just tell me exactly what you want. You know, like, well, tell me exactly how to mop. Just show me how to mop. It's sort of like, so this idea of that we, on a Wednesday night, are going to be able to think of all the various permutations of, you know, Libby has a lot of good things written down, but there's some things we haven't thought about. Do we have storm tide pathways in there? Do we have, you know?
Why don't you have two of you get together and come up with a list, and then you bring it back to the board and you discuss it?
I understand. We do, but exactly. But the point I'm making is, are we qualified, or any of us, you know, 4 or 5, you know, are we qualified to understand what the impacts are on coastal properties? Are we qualified to know this? We kind of aren't. And so we're asking something, you know, sometimes we get asked to figure out something that none of us sitting here, staff included, are qualified to answer. And then we do just enough, and then it happens. And so I just, you know, that's a little difficult sometimes.
I think because it's going to be on the agenda again, I think it's something that we can discuss before then and hopefully have a better answer and more direction.
Couple thoughts. Certainly, I didn't say we want it before you because I didn't feel like doing something. Secondly, I did not even list half of what I wrote down here. A couple of things strike me here. Maybe we need a better, more clear checklist of what REAC looks at that lists a lot of the things that have been brought up tonight, and we have other people review that checklist that are more skilled, I guess, at assessing the various issues with coastal property, including the Coastal Resiliency Coordinator. Maybe the Concom might want to weigh in on something like this. And we develop this checklist kind of a document that you can very clearly see what has been evaluated for every coastal parcel that might go through a yard sale program. You all can review it before it gets enacted, and with, again, this other level of review that I'm talking about, and maybe go from there.
That sounds good to me. Is the board okay with that?
And if you have other groups that you want to have specifically review it, I mentioned Concom because obviously they spend a lot of time on coastal property issues.
I think this will be coming up again, so I think we can move on. When?
Do you mean the next full board meeting or the next full board meeting with real estate?
I think we'll have to talk to the chair about when to bring this back. I don't think we're going to hold it off for too long, but I think we need the chair to help decide.
I do know. That's why I'm asking. Is we're just trying to,
that's what I
because I think your only decision on these, once the RFP is out, is either to approve the RFP or to keep the land forever and screw the landowner.
So I think we'll be taking them back up again with a full board.
Not appropriate language.
It's not, but again, I think we're aware of what the options are. So we'll take it up again. It sounds like possibly in March, but we'll wait for the chair to make that decision.
And I think that, you know, how it was, you've just presented it, is exactly why I'm concerned, because we have built such expectations in, you know, right from the beginning. And our, you know, and I just want to make sure that we're building in expectations that, you know, for the right parcels in the right places that aren't, you know, against, you know, smart planning and smart, you know, coastal stuff and all the different issues that we have as a public. So I, you know, that's why I think a review of the program, and I know the situation you're in, but I think the review of the program is needed because of how strongly the homeowners are so vested in it. You know, they've worked so long, they're so vested in it, and it comes to us, and we've had some, you know, not this one. I think this is relatively straightforward, but we've had some that we're you know, James Street's a perfect example. We're taking away public access for all the other neighbors, blah blah blah, and we're told, well, nothing you can do now. Nothing to see here, nothing to do now. We've been talking about it for 15 years, and it seems to, we lose our rights the longer we talk about it. So I just, you know, so I think that there's a lot going on. So
Yeah, and we'll be taking it up. And I think, again, many of the decisions we make have to do with individual property owners versus what is best for the community at large. And I think without further consideration that goes deeper into depth with coastal resiliency, again, I think we can't just make decisions on the fly, which this one feels like to me, but it will be coming back. So.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yep. Okay, moving on to number 3. Under real estate items, it will be similar. It's the request for approval and execution of purchase and sale agreement under the yard sale program for Myrtle Street, parcel 2, Myrtle Street, unnamed way, and Holly Street.
The issues are exactly the same. I would anticipate a similar motion from the select board with respect to this.
Does anyone have any questions or want to make a motion?
I move to bring it back up at the same time we bring up the other article.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is that an aye?
Opposed.
Opposed. 1 opposed. Okay.
Do you want to discuss it tonight? Are you opposed to should we bring it up and discuss this one, specific one or no?
No, I think the last time I've been thinking about it in the last 5 minutes. I think it's good what we're doing of reevaluating the yard sale and trying to help direct them on what we're talking about the last couple months. But this is the second time in 2 or 3 weeks we're at the 11th hour after an RFP. We went another direction, but not give direction of what we want. So I'm okay with changing at 11th hour, but we're not being clear of what we want. And like you said, we don't know. So for me, I'm okay with putting this forward and then taking care of business with REACT and yard sale, whatever. So that's kind of as I'm sitting here processing it.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. That's why.
Right, thanks.
Okay. My mic up.
So I'm gonna read it or me?
Your mic's down here.
Okay.
Jason? Yeah.
I know who's talking to.
Okay, item number 4, request for approval and execution of amendment of restriction to allow for 81L subdivision of 10 Easy Street.
Right. This is fairly straightforward, but it's another yard sale situation. A number of years ago, there was a yard sale parcel. If we can pull the map up, I think it really is the easiest way to explain this.
No, there wasn't. That was one of my comments on this one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can pass this map around.
Yeah, I know the property. Yeah.
Okay. This is a parcel on the corner, and the yard sale parcel is the rounded edge on this map. The map has two lots defined, one in green and one in orange. The yard sale parcel would be added to the parcel in orange. The property can be subdivided into 2 parcels because of Section 81L of the law, and that means that there was a property on each of these 2 parcels that were in existence prior to zoning, and as a result of that, there is a legal right to subdivide the parcel irrespective of the minimum ground cover. So what's important is that the addition of the yard sale parcel to this property has no effect, and that's the yard sale parcel is that little number 6, and that gets added to the parcel where the big house is in the front. And so the condition is that the yard sale parcel had to be added to the abutting parcel, and there was a provision that said that it couldn't be then used to subdivide the property. It is not necessary for the subdivision of the property because the subdivision is with respect to a different part of the law. And so this is just to clarify the language that language doesn't prevent them from subdividing the property, which is being done under Section 181L, not under any other terms. And so the request is to approve the amendment to the restriction. Town Council has reviewed and drafted the language with respect to the modification of the restriction.
Any questions from the board?
I don't. I mean, I'm going to support this. The comment is, though, is that what we've done in the yard sale is, if we add, the goal of that is to, the wording is in there so we do not get an extra lot. We don't get 2 more houses, because when we first did some of the early yard sales, that was happening. We were making we were selling it for pennies on the dollar, and then the property was subdividable
Because of the additional yard sale.
and a bunch of things like that were happening. And so that's why that wording was inserted.
Correct.
To assure that was, because that wasn't the goal, especially in sensitive areas, So, I'm fine with this. It's downtown. When I look at it, because I grew up down there, it's kind of sad to me that we'll, most likely, hopefully maybe we won't, but that's a yard and there's actually plantings in it. And when you look at the GIS map from above, most of the properties are all bricked in, either for parking. There's no yards anymore. It's sort of, it's sad, but there's not much we can do. If you look at it above, there's a lot of green space in that property, which exists. But you look at the ones that have been fixed recently, and it's all brick, and there's no, downtown Nantucket used to have a lot of pretty amazing gardens, and it wasn't all parking yards. And so it's sort of, I'm wistful for how it used to be, but I guess it is what it is. There's no parking requirements. This will be all, at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to public hearings. I'll open the public hearing to consider the utility petition from National Grid at 22 Boulevard.
Jim Huxley, engineer, National Grid. In this one here, we're looking for the customer to install 40 feet of conduit encased in concrete off an existing junction to serve a transformer on the property of number 22.
This is a public hearing. Are there any comments from the public or any questions from the board? I'll close the public hearing. And is there a motion?
Approved with the recommendations from staff.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Number 2, I'm opening the public hearing to consider utility petition from National Grid for 24 and 26 Trotters Lane.
Yes, well, we're looking for the customer to install one handhole and 85 feet of conduit to supply lot number 24 and number 26.
This is a public hearing. Any comments from the public or any questions from the board? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion from the board?
Move to approve with recommendations.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Number 3, opening the public hearing to consider a utility petition from National Grid for property at 17 Sherburne Turnpike.
Yes, National Grid, along with our contractor and the customer, we're going to install a transformer and 210 feet of conduit in order to supply number 17, and in the process remove 2 poles.
Is there any comment from the public or any questions from the board?
I just had a question about the sewer comment, that there's limited information on the older line. Is it still okay to proceed?
We'll find out when they start digging.
Yeah.
I mean, it isn't the first
They'll
time.
make sure. They've been doing work out there the past 2 months
they'll,
or so.
and they'll just be more careful when they're doing this, because they don't know where it is.
They're going to have to dig safe.
Yeah, they'll dig safe the electrical, but which
Good
they can find those. They can
Yeah.
find the electric, but
Okay, so with the comments noted, I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion from the board?
Motion to approve? What? Yes.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, number 4, I'll open the public hearing to consider an application for a new annual all-alcoholic beverage general on-premises license for Nantucket Historical Association.
Good evening. This application, liquor license application for the Whaling Museum at 15 Broad Street. This is for a general on-premise all alcohol liquor license. I'll remind you, this category does not require a common vicular, which means consistent food service like a restaurant. Similar type of licenses would be the Dreamland, White Heron Theater. We also converted Chicken Box to that as well, since they're not a restaurant. So it's that type of license. This request really started with licensing as we were working through the licenses and working with the Whaling Museum in the past few years. There is a limit on, we've been doing one-day temporary pouring permits that we do for special events and the like. The state limit for such a license is 30 of those one-day licenses at a location per year. That's the maximum state limit. Local municipalities can certainly limit that. Our local regulations really require that it's just mostly for those organizations that do, once a year events, fundraisers, and things of that sort. For some of these special event facilities, we were doing day limits until they really started to increase. The other thing that really increased it was the understanding when I came in and discussed it with the state is that as a publicly accessed building, like the Dreamland or the Whaling Museum, and as a commercial enterprise in a sense, any single thing that happens in there should be licensed, meaning weddings, meaning personal events that for years had not been part of the number. So I know, so that's where this kind of originated. We've been going and working with them over the past few years as they've kind of developed what their operations were. And so that's kind of what really started to push that number. I know I've been asked as far as how many of those one-day permits we have been issuing. 2018, it was at 26. Last year, it was up to 28. In 2018, we weren't counting some of those private events. We really kind of gave them some time to kind of get up and running and kind of get used to this. And that's why Dreamland came in last year as well, because the weddings and all that would throw that over the edge. And then 28 last year. There are some, organizations that would do an event there and they would pull the license, so it wasn't necessarily coming from NHA. But how we felt and how most museums do operate across the state is with a full liquor license. It actually allows for better compliance, allows us to work with them better, and they're on an even playing field with all the other facilities serving alcohol. The question also came to us as well as far as entertainment and then the different restrictions we have with the Dreamland, which is a similar type of operation. We did license the Whaling Museum for live entertainment in 2016, which does allow for live entertainment in the interior, in the museum spaces, as well as the rooftop, with the restriction of 10 p.m. for any events there. The question was in Dreamland. And again, one thing I want to stress is this is not a hearing to make any changes to the entertainment license. That would need to be requested and scheduled at a later time. I just wanted to address any of the comments that we've received this week. So back where was I? Dreamland. So Dreamland did a similar type of thing where we licensed their entertainment on that patio, on the back deck there as well. The restrictions there were 9 p.m. really. And communication with the neighbors and abutters. And their liquor license restrictions were really on the theater because that's a location that people can buy a drink and pass it off to kids, and there's a lot of kids that might come into that theater. So we put some restrictions as far as, one drink per person as far as buying that, being able to identify those that did have alcoholic beverages, things of that sort to really kind of control the theater type of instance. Otherwise, there weren't any restrictions on liquor service. So we should make sure we concentrate on liquor service in the museum space. They've requested the rooftop as well for liquor service in this license, and their enclosed outdoor space to, as you're looking at the museum, to the left of the museum. So those are the spaces we have to consider this evening as well. Were there any, I'm trying to make sure I covered all the points there as well. I know we'll have some comments from the public. I would like to say that ahead of that, White Heron Theater, which is across the street, as well. We've been talking with the NHA and White Heron, and they have a good relationship, and I'll let them make the comments too as well. One of the comments was for the entertainment and how that might affect the theater on some nights. They have done in the past few years a summer sunset series on Monday nights in the summer, up to 8 of these on the rooftop, and that's what people are talking about as far as how is that's going to affect. Is it going to become a full-time bar? No, this license is for special events, special event facility. Any change in that would have to be reviewed and altered. Yes.
Well, if there's no entertainment, it could, every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, there could be a bar up there, right? If there's no entertainment, it doesn't.
If they had alcohol service, if they had a reception or had
Or
an
anything.
educational thing, they can serve alcohol up there.
Right.
Correct.
Right,
Correct.
7 nights a week. I'm not opposed to this. We have to do our due diligence and try to
Correct.
understand it.
So you'd be approving the spaces. However, the state has definitely gotten more detailed as far as the description. They're now asking for a description of really the operations and the type of business that we are licensing as well, which is helpful for us too, because we kind of review that. But it's gotten more detailed in that sense, so we do have the ability to come back if the operations tend to change in that sense.
What are the conditions of the entertainment license?
It's the only condition is 10 p.m. ceasing any outdoor is 10 p.m. White Heron is similar, that they have to close doors at 10 p.m.
So they could have
Rose and Crown has to close
music.
at 10 p.m.
I understand. So they could have music out there 7 nights a week as long as they're done at 10 p.m.
There's no correct right now. There's
Okay.
no restrictions on the number.
Okay.
They've only done up to 8, and some of those have been acoustic up there as well. They haven't operated in that sense yet, and I have no record of recorded complaints on them. What the issue came up with, and again, it's a sort of situation, if we did start to get complaints, we could bring in and deal with that on an entertainment license issue. The Dreamland itself does have a restriction of 6 events out on that patio for a DJ type of situation. So we did put a restriction on that. But most of those locations, it's 10 p.m. as well. I think the discussion, and I'll let them make comments too as well, was the thump, thump, thump that might affect the theater. We certainly encourage communication between neighbors, and they're good at that. And it's certainly, if we had to deal with that issue, we would certainly do so.
If we were to license the Whaling Museum but not the roof, would they be able to pull special permits for rooftop events? No.
No, that would be difficult. You can't pull temporary permits in a licensed facility. Outdoor spaces certainly are treated separately, and there's patio guidelines. A roof gets a little bit different, but it is obviously outdoor space, and that can contribute to the neighborhood or anything of that sort. If we look at it that way, that's tough. That becomes more of an entertainment issue, I think. You have patio service of alcohol next door, across the street. White Heron as well has outdoor alcohol service. I just want to caution that if we're making a decision based on amplified music or that type of thing, that needs to be handled separately in a separate hearing.
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to think all the way through it since I've been on the board, and how we limited Graydon House and how the other businesses could be affected, and just make sure we're thinking through it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Amy, is there wording in the license that mentions special events, or is it more standard?
For alcohol service?
Yeah.
Not so much. You can kind of, when you're doing a liquor license, work on hours. Technically, state law really should not be adjusting hours before 11 p.m. State law allows for 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. On Sundays, 12 p.m. to 11 p.m. And then, unless you want it, you can do up to 10 a.m. on Sundays. But after 11 p.m. is where the town makes that decision. So it's more on hours. That would be tougher to do. And at this point, they're doing 1 days, and there are ways to finagle that law too as well. So this makes it easier in a compliance, in enforcement, and them being able to operate too as well. In the private events, it started getting messy because the state added a caterer's liquor license, which we don't have many caterers who do that here. So it became messy for the caterers and could hurt their business too as well, because only the 2 with a liquor license could cater. So it's starting to get very messy.
Okay.
I mean, the state, with all due respect, sometimes makes it a little difficult, but that's where it was starting to get messy in this type of facility.
Great. Thank you. This is a public hearing. Are there any comments from the public? Yes.
Good evening, members. Michael Kopko, White Heron Theater. We're at 5 North Water Street, right behind the Whaling Museum. And full disclosure, as Amy said, I am the manager of the exact same liquor license that's being sought here tonight by the NHA. And at first I want to say I'm here to speak in favor of the license because we're big supporters of the NHA. We have a great relationship with them. James and I talk a lot about all kinds of programmatic things and issues we have between each other. The past history has been that they have had these sunset events on the roof of the Whaling Museum. You all have probably been by there at some point when this is going on. And it's fairly loud and fairly early in the evening, which is, our programs generally run at sort of 7:30 in the evening and we're done by 10 o'clock. And the Monday night program has affected our ability to program theater productions in our theater on those nights that they have those events. And James and I are talking now about how to mitigate things going forward. I know that in the application, I didn't see anything specific about, there was sort of a list of 4 types of events that they have. And I didn't see anything specific about the kind of programming that happens on the roof. Is this a ticketed event? Is it a special event? I think Amy's been doing a great job with cleaning up these like 30 one-day licenses over the year and bringing people into compliance. Our license, for example, has a number of conditions on it, both I think from the town, from you all, and from the planning department in our special permit, that restrictions on hours. And for example, our service is only offered programmatically. When we have an event at the theater, that's when we can serve to people who are coming to the event. We can't open the bar to the public, for example, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and say anybody can come in and buy a drink and sit around.
You can't rent it to a caterer?
No, we can't. If we have an event that was a good question actually before. Now that we have a license, we have to provide the liquor service for any event that happens in our place, which is actually a good thing because then we can keep an eye on all of that. And so I guess I'm just, like I say, we have an ongoing relationship and discussions going forward. I know my understanding is they have 8 Monday night events planned for this summer in July and August. And we have managed over the last few years to sort of program around those Monday nights when we know we can't have a theater production in the building those nights because of the noise. And we probably will be discussing with Amy and James about the entertainment license going forward. The difference that's being proposed now, of course, is that theoretically, when you're coming in for one-day licenses, those events are vetted theoretically to some extent about, okay, what are the times, how's it going to work, who's coming, all of that stuff. And of course now with just sort of a blanket license for the year, the potential is there to, I don't know, have a bar on the roof 6 or 7 nights a week, like what was mentioned here before. And we sort of feel like we've managed to work with the Monday night situation to this point, and that in a way that works for both organizations, but that any kind of sort of expansion of that kind of activity outdoors in, and there aren't many. We have a liquor license and a roof, but I'm not sure we'd be successful in trying to get events on our roof downtown, and the next thing you know, every nonprofit roof downtown has an event one night a week. I don't think any of us want to go there. So I guess I'm just asking for some guidance from you guys and for you to take into consideration. I don't know what kind of conditioning you can do. I don't know like that, and just to know that we have an ongoing discussion about these issues too in a very friendly relationship. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you should let the NHA, let James up next. Yeah.
Sure.
I was just going to address a couple points if I could, just to clarify the conditions and thinking through a couple things. As far as conditions, as far as, being worried about it being open to the public, a couple days a week. And we've done this before, like if the one other I didn't mention was PPX Events, which is further down from the Dreamland there too as well. And we discussed this with them. And the Dreamland condition as well is that it is not open for the public coming off the street on a regular basis. It is for special events only. So that's what I meant by, it can be ticketed or a nonprofit event or a private wedding events. Like PPX cannot just have a bar open. They've had some things with some shopping type of events and stuff because it's an event space, but it's not for me to come off the street and I'm going to get a drink at PPX. I'm going to the, daffodil party or the some sort of nonprofit sort of situation, if that helps. So we did have that type of language on that. One other thing I want to clarify as far as one-day licenses, I know some package store says, well, if they get a full license, that's going to hurt us because we can't provide liquor for the weddings or these other events. They shouldn't have been doing that before. It had been done, but one-day licenses had the same conditions. You buy from a distributor, it has to be licensed or trained servers like at a bar, and insurance requirements. So you cannot buy from a package store for any licensed event, whether it's a one day or a full. So I wanted to clarify that as well. The 1 days are going to have the same requirements. It's just for that 1 day.
Thank you. And James from the NHA, if you'd like to say anything.
Thank you. Perhaps just a couple of points, maybe just to give James Russell, head of the NHA. I'm here with my colleagues, Rebecca and Johanna, and if there are any specific questions that I can't answer, maybe I could ask them to come forward. What might be helpful as you make your decision here is to get a sense of kind of directionally how we're thinking about this. And I think the first thing to notice is that we're here. We weren't here this time last year. We deliberately held off on going down this path so that we could see how our colleagues and peers at the Dreamland fared, thought about it, how it worked out. And we've been engaged in the better part of a year and a half to 2 years of due diligence. I want to thank Amy for your advice on this. Thank you, Amy, and the chief for your advice on this too. So that's the first point. Second point is, again, directionally and tonally, I don't think you get into the museum business to say, let's go get a liquor license, right? I mean, that's not how the 80 plus staff people working at the NHA think. We think about educational programs, we think about how to engage the community, we think about programs, and we don't say, let's go figure out how to make it the best Mai Tai. That's not our job. So when we think about this, we think of value added. So that's, I think, an important point. There are certainly programs evolve. The Sunset series that Michael spoke about specifically is something that will evolve. Programs start, they're good ideas, they ramp up, and they die. That's just the nature of programs over time. What we have to be very mindful of, and we will be mindful of, is our neighbors. Edwin, I don't know whether Edwin is here. Edwin and I were chatting yesterday. We all live in the same block. We all have our needs and our desires, and working together is very important. And particularly with a synergistic operation like White Heron, I mean, we certainly, why would we want to, and it may be difficult to legislate against this, but how would we, or for this, or against it, but why would we want to engage in conduct which would harm arts programs, which is exactly what we try to promote. I can tell you that directionally we're not going to pursue those types of activities, particularly although we would like to keep that Monday night if that is something that we agree to, but we don't necessarily see an expansion of down the roof, because particularly that heavy amplified thumping music can be, it's something that transmits. I don't fully understand, I'm not an acoustic engineer, but if Michael says you can hear in the theater, I believe it, and it's existential for for him to produce good programs, and we don't want to do anything to interfere with that. I understand that that is not the issue with music, which is inside. To give you an idea of what are we talking about here? And I've heard this comment that you do a lot of weddings over at the Whaling Museum. Well, that is absolutely not true. We actually do very, very few weddings. We do less than a handful of weddings. I think there were 7 weddings or so in the entire year last year. That's not what we're looking for. The vast majority of our programs which would benefit from this is they tend to be community-oriented events like an exhibit, a program, a lecture. There was an annual meeting last year where we served punch. I've got no problem having alcohol-free events, and I think that's important to note. We certainly don't want to be in the business of promoting any sense of alcohol dependency in these events, but there were a number of member events and community events where it would have been nice if we could have served a glass of wine, particularly in honor of outgoing trustees, for instance, at that annual members meeting that I was thinking about. That's one type of event. And that is the bulk of the activities. I can think of 8 or 9 similar small 50 to 75 person events which take place around 5, 6 o'clock with very, very light footprint and a minimal consumption of alcohol. So that's one type of event, and that's by far the largest in terms of programmatic events that we do, which would be impacted by this. Second would be the fundraising type events, which I have to say, are very, very important to us. Think of our big summer fundraiser, or think about community events like Festival of Reeds and Trees. But there are not too many of those. The third type of events that we would like to increase, we're doing more of, is recognizing, particularly in the cold winter months, one of the great assets, the strategic differentiating asset of the NHA, is the fact that we've got warm, climate-controlled indoor space that other synergistic nonprofits can use. So to give you an example of that, think about the Music Center, for instance, may want to have a performance. So it would be nice if those nonprofits, ever-growing number of nonprofits, might want to look at our venues to have their events. And usually these are, we don't charge for these. We don't charge to nonprofits. Sometimes we charge a ticket. But we would see that type of event. That would be a third type of event. And then the fourth is, I guess theoretically, and as Michael and I were talking about, if we lived in if the NHA was in a field away from everywhere, wouldn't it be ideal if we could make a lot of money from weddings all the time? Well, it doesn't work that way because it's not like our phone is ringing. This is very driven by market demand. And believe me, we try to court that because it's a very nice revenue source, and frankly, it decreases our reliance on philanthropy. But that's not the case, and we don't necessarily see a geometric increase in the number of these programs. That's not to say that we won't try to or promote it, but it takes 2 to tango, and so I don't necessarily see a rise in that, and who knows, with a dipping economy, there may very well be a fall in it. So I just want to give you a sense, and probably to end with again underscoring the values of the NHA is one of being very mindful of our place in the community. We have a number of employees, who think about this all day long, how we can provide goodwill to the community, and I think it's in that spirit that we approach you now after 2 years of consultation on this.
Great, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Is there any more comment from the public? Yes.
Jamie Holmes, General Manager of the Nantucket Hotel. We would probably be perceived as someone that would say this is against our business model, but over the years we've worked with James. We think he's doing a fantastic job at the NHA, and I'm happy to hear that this isn't an attempt to change his business model and become directly competitive with existing businesses. I look at it as he's working with the town to facilitate the licensing and to ensure that the business is operated in an appropriate manner. And from our point of view, we're happy with what they're doing. We like the way they run their business, and we think there's a lot of thoughtful leadership there. And we don't perceive this as an attempt to extract business out of other people who might like to have a few of those weddings. So,
Thank you very much. Is there any more public comment or any more questions from the board?
I had a question. Will the the NHA be open year round? Like, will this be a year round liquor license?
Yes, I believe it is a year-round liquor license.
We did, because they will allow them to do things in the holidays or through the, winter times if they wanted to. It's not as much a requirement as when you have a restaurant that's open to the public. It's special events, so we tend to allow them to be, have these events during year round. So it wouldn't be the same requirement, like 3 days are closed, they have to let us know. It's a different type of standard.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a couple comments, I guess. Is there any more public comment?
I think looks like we're done with public comment.
All right.
Close the public hearing. Yeah, I'll close the public hearing and comments.
Yeah, I was the select board member, maybe there are two of us, but they voted against liquor on Sundays way back. I didn't win that one. I don't win sometimes, but I do have a concern with the reliance on alcohol that we have island-wide. We can't raise money unless there's alcohol. We can't, run a nonprofit unless there's alcohol. We can't, we have, we are turning into, the police have done a really good job tamping down 4th of July, but we've turned into, sort of we're heading to the, Jersey Shore for the, Vineyard Vine set. That's, and those young adults. And so I get worried that, and I didn't vote on the Dreamland because I sell them stuff, so I didn't vote on them. It's worked out fine there, but there are strict restrictions on it that, I would feel more comfortable if they were in place here on the entertainment side. So it was just Mondays at night. I looked at it and I wonder why the whole place. I understand why all of it has to be in there now. I'd feel a little better if there were restrictions on the Monday night thing. And then and then we've got the outside space. I agree. I trust James, and it's thoughtful and well run now. That doesn't mean that will always be that way. I do get a little worried when I hear, we only do 7 weddings and we'd like to do more. Do we want them to do 7 more? So that's just a comment. Some of the things in the packet, growing business, quote unquote, was one of the comments. Commercial enterprise, you mentioned that earlier tonight. Value added. We just gave someone, a liquor license so they could have value added, in a place that we denied twice in a row. I think it's a creeping, it's sort of creeping, and we add it and we add it. So I just think this has more, how do I say, part of them doing once, every 30 times a year, they were limited. The police were on notice that something was happening. That may not happen, unless we put it in the entertainment license. That won't happen now because they'll just be able to do something. So there's things like that we need to be thinking through. And the other question, the other thing that we really should be thinking about, these are nonprofit entities. They don't pay taxes. And they are, and good on Jamie for saying, that he's in support of it, but they are when they start running some of these events, when they start running weddings and they start running, entertainment et cetera, they are directly in competition with everybody. And so, everybody else is paying, paying taxes and everything else. And I support the NHA. I'm a member. It's great. But I think those are the things that we as a board should be really thinking about, when we do this. Thank you.
I'll say a couple of things. One, I just want to remind of the 5 considerations when we consider these licenses per law. Competition cannot be the sole reason for denying it. One thing I like to say is that the goal we've had over the past couple of years is taking what was the Wild Wild West and trying to bring it into compliance. What I'd rather have is facilities like this, like the Whaling Museum, fully licensed, so they are on par with the other licensed facilities, and those folks that are choosing to do special events are doing them in facilities like this that are fully compliant, that are up with fire code, that are safer, and not these. One thing that's going to be next are homes that are regularly rented out and that are businesses. They should be licensed too as well. The state has told us that. Even homes that are regularly rented out for these things should be too. And let me tell you, they're not up to code. So I would prefer, if we're going to bring everyone up into compliance and have these things available for the community that we have, and they are very good to work with the community. They work with these nonprofits as well. It's quite a business. I'm not saying it's a commercial enterprise, but this is a way to make us have more ability to work with them for inspections, for compliance. They'll be in compliance checks and things of that sort now, which they are not now. So if we're going to look at this, it's not adding a liquor license. They've been doing these events coming on. It's for us to bring this town into some sort of compliance and regularity and be more fair across the board, so that when we start to deal with these other types of facilities, we have these available. So that's what I'm looking to do.
I understand that.
You know what I mean?
And I'm not disagreeing with that.
Yeah.
I
agree with
understand
those
what you're
points,
saying,
too.
but the other point, sometimes we make a decision, and I spoke with a friend of mine today, and he reminded me of how we ended up with 9-month seasonal license. Prior, we had a 3-month seasonal and a 6-month seasonal liquor license. It's different
Right.
license.
Yep.
But and that isn't my point. We need to talk about that in future. But then at the end of a long night, one night, there was a motion to move it to 9 months. Bam, it was 9 months, and we were done. And that has had impacts on, and we're not supposed to think about competition, but that has impacts on an island on how the people that used to have a whole year-round license, they would make their money at Thanksgiving and Stroll, and that would get them through the winter. Right. And then they'd stay open all winter. And by going to 9 months, what we've done, it was unforeseen consequence. What we've done is everyone skims the cream and leaves, and we're having trouble, and so I just think, I just want to be thinking ahead and spending the time on this, it's one thing, the NHA and this one building, who's going to come next? What nonprofit comes next? Because it will help them.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I completely agree with that. First of all, the 9-month thing is a state law issue, and I've tried to work with them on what options are, and it's going to be special legislation in order for us to do something that fits this community, because no other community fits the conditions that we have right now. So the 9-month thing is state.
We had 3 and 6.
Well, that might have been a state that must have
I
changed.
doubt it. I think we just did it, but
Okay, well,
anyway,
maybe.
that's not for tonight. I'm just
I was going to say, I think that's
not for
something that's a different discussion.
Yeah.
So coming back to the NHA liquor license, is there anything specific to the liquor license for NHA? And if not, is the board ready for a motion?
I had a couple more questions.
Oh, yeah, sure.
This will be specifically for special events, or do we need to name that as we're going through this?
I would put in the conditions that a general on-premise for special events only, not to be open to, for the public on a daily basis for special events only, similar to what the vote was for the past ones.
Mm-hmm. And implementing something similar to the Dreamland with 1 drink per person. Would that be at this time or not?
So state law is 2 per person as far as that. What that condition was is similar to other types of movie theaters, is the purchasing of 2 drinks, 1 person going to buy for them and their friend. Well, they take it into a dark theater somewhere that's away from the bartender, that can't be observed as far as who it's being passed off to. Okay. That was the purpose of that. I don't know how it would be policed or enforced in this situation. That's why that condition was put for the Dreamland Theater only, not for their special events.
Okay. And then the outside yard, is that for programming? Is that a necessity for this?
Special events, it's similar to White Heron across the street has their patio area, and the restriction or the condition put on them too, as well, as it needed to be sectioned off like the patio guidelines are from the street, and theirs is had more access to the street, so they did put up a stanchion and that sort of thing, so that folks from the street couldn't just walk in type of situation. That's a requirement. It's not, you can certainly make that a condition that that's not included. That's for you to do, but there's similar types of areas in that neighborhood.
Okay.
Another question is, so the events, the liquor can be sold or be given? It doesn't make any difference?
Yeah, delivery constitutes a sale. So if, someone buys a ticket for the whole thing, or they have an event,
Right.
special event, correct.
Okay.
So the money doesn't have to change hands at that moment.
I just have a question and comment. Amy, for the Graydon House, did we limit the alcohol in the patio outside, or was it just music? I thought we limited liquor.
Liquor, I think it was for dinner service only, and I believe, I want to say there is a time, and it might even be midnight, or they have to stop serving at a certain time. But it was entertainment and alcohol only for dinner service only. They couldn't have a bar out there.
All right, so I asked that just for us to try to be consistent. So not to pick on you guys anymore tonight. But if you're on that side by the Graydon House, if you were just they decide to have something outside there in the day, a benefit, an event, I would have to say no to that if it was to be consistent with the Graydon House, because we
Correct.
didn't want liquor outside at lunch, and we didn't want
Right.
that was about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, they had put at one point put some couches out there and stuff, and we said, oh, that's not quite.
So I think we were tough there. So I just want to be consistent.
Correct.
I don't think that you guys are planning on doing that. I just wanted to. I'm trying to think of.
Correct. Yeah.
How to be consistent. I think the differentiator here is that it's not open to the public, which you clarified, Christine, a couple times. And licensing wants this, and you've been working on it for a year and a half. I hear what everything Matt is saying. If we pass this is the 100th liquor license.
99.
I just did the math
Really?
on what you have
Is
here,
it?
and it's
It might
99
have
existing.
Okay. I said 100. I was done. So see you.
That's not a reason not to vote.
Should we have a
this.
liquor license here and we could toast it after the vote?
I have one more question about the outside area. Could we limit the hours of that so that couldn't be lunchtime liquor served?
Yeah, there would. Yeah, it is easier to do those limitations on an outdoor space because that tends to affect the neighboring properties a little bit more.
Rooftop? You mean
Right, the outside.
No, the
that's
outdoor space.
on North Water Street.
They have an enclosed area out there as well.
But that's kind of a parking yard, isn't it now?
No.
That's where is it that I'm missing it?
If you're looking at the museum, it's to the left, and it's a white gated area. So like you're looking at the museum, and then Graydon House is here, but there's a white fence on the very left hand side of the.
It's all bricked.
It's grass halfway up to.
Where is it shown on the?
Which one?
Go up a little, one more, right there.
Where?
The yellow.
So it's on the left side.
Here?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not highlighted as one of the spaces.
Well, it's included in the description as to what's licensed.
So can I just sort of ask the board, what I'm hearing is possible restrictions or language that specifies special events only. Possible restrictions on the side yard, either time or no liquor at all at the side yard.
I think if we want to be consistent with what we did with the Graydon House, we were pretty restrictive, then I would say nothing on that side. They're probably not even planning on doing anything, so it's probably a moot point.
Okay.
I just want us to consider it.
Yeah. I'm definitely in favor of the special events only, I think, and it seems that that's in keeping with what they have in mind. The side yard, I am okay, definitely with restrictions, time or saying no bars, alcohol service on the side yard. So I don't know if there's anything else anyone wants to add, or if there's a motion.
I'm looking at a GIS of the side yard now, and I think there's a space for like 7 cars, and then there's a little green space there, and it's on North Water. I don't know that we even need to include it.
Okay.
To be honest, if you look at the picture.
We might not need it. I just wanted to
For consistency.
Be consistent.
And then you take away that whole problem.
Yeah. So then it's really just having the language for special events only.
Special events, it's the roof and it's the inside of the building. Is
That's
that
already in
fine?
there, right?
Yeah.
And the time limit on the roof already is 10 p.m.
Okay.
So that's not going to change.
The language is already in there, right, for the just events only?
Yeah,
Right,
correct.
so, yeah. Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Special events only,
Special
no side
events,
yard.
no side
You
yard.
said that was already in there.
Well, it's in the motion. Yeah,
Oh,
it
I'm
was.
sorry, I thought it was already in the,
In the license.
So motion to approve special events only,
And no side yard.
side yard not included
Correct.
on
North water.
And that was a unanimous vote.
Yes.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
I did.
Christie.
Christie.
and Amy, will we be visiting the entertainment license for that this year?
Well, that
Is that done?
we're gonna work on things on the side here, and like I said, that sort of thing would have to be requested. And I asked White Heron too if there were issues to put that in writing, and we can address it and request any sort of hearing if necessary. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Moving on to town manager's report, we have traffic safety work group recommendations.
Okay, we have 4 current recommendations here. The first is to designate a portion of Myacomet Road between Surfside Road and Otokomi Road as no parking either side. Currently, it's no parking on the south side only, and anybody from the group can certainly speak about this, but I think we're seeing more and more cars that are there for weeks and months at a time, and is creating a safety issue.
And this is just a simple approve this
Yes.
this
we
evening or
will
not?
Post it, and then as needed, people can be ticketed.
I'm in favor of this. I talked with Mike today a little bit of what traffic and, what is it, traffic and safety? Traffic safety discussed, and just kind of thinking about where are these cars going to get pushed to, and where is this going to become a problem next? And, we kind of thought that through, and we couldn't come up with any real solutions, but just thinking that it's probably going to come where there might be something coming up on Essex or near Sachems where we're going to see this problem where all these cars are going to get shifted somewhere else.
And there's a year-round bus service, so people could maybe do something else.
My only question was, we'll put up the signs, and then I believe it's up to the people living there to call it in if someone's parked, right? It's not somewhere we patrol for parking. So somebody would call it in, and then we
Well,
would.
people can call it in, but certainly the patrol officers will know that it's a no parking area, and if they're in the area, they can write a ticket.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Second is install no parking lines in front of Archway and Unit 5A of Brant Point Courtyard, located at 15 Swain Street. I don't know if there's a backup explanation for this. Maybe it's obvious.
Yeah, it sounds like people are parking in front of the walkway.
Yeah.
And people can't get into there. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. Look at that, Mike. I got that one.
Mike's last meeting.
Motion to approve?
Is there a
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Not lastly. I was hoping. Designate section of Center Street from India to Hussey as one-way northwest bound. Then the proposed two-way section would be between Broad and Hussey. If the board is so inclined, this will end up needing to be a public hearing. So this is basically to see if you want to proceed to that step. Do you want to? We probably all have had our personal experiences with this section. You had one.
I think we should have a public hearing.
Okay.
I think we should, personally. And, people were grousing when we did the Broad Street and made it one way, and that's worked out great, so.
Yeah, I'm for this, and if we need to do public hearings, that's policy, that's fine. When I first saw it, I thought it really wasn't a big of a deal until this weekend, when it happened to me. When I was coming down Center Street, getting close to Hussey, someone came, Chestnut took a left. I thought they were just gonna, left, right, and go to Hussey, but they wanted to go straight down Center Street to India. Well, I couldn't move, because it's pretty much just a one lane. So they had to back up, and then I had to scoot in, and then we had to kind of like wiggle our way through. It's never happened to me in 21 years, but it happened on Saturday. So it makes sense because you can still get around different ways, Hussey or Broad to get to India.
Yeah, I went and drove it this afternoon, and if you start to go down Center and realize it's one way, you can go up Hussey but come right back down India. And then, so I think the police and fire can go out Chestnut and get up through Hussey to leave town. So I think it makes sense.
Police fire go anywhere they want. They go right down Center.
That's true.
So it's more of a motion for a public hearing is what we need this evening.
Yeah, so if you're all good with that, we'll schedule it at some point soon.
Motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous.
Okay, lastly, change newly approved loading zone end time on Broad in front of the Brotherhood from 4 p.m. to 12 p.m. and reverse a board prior decision to eliminate the loading zone on Broad at Center so that loading zone would be basically reinstated, or just, I don't know if it's even gone yet, but it would remain there. Maybe Mike can speak a little bit more on this, but I think this is part of a larger effort to make the loading zones more accessible for the delivery trucks and get them to use them more.
I'd like to hear Mike speak. This is his last time speaking here.
I was afraid I wouldn't get a chance to speak for the last time, but I am here, so I'm at my last select board meeting. Again, you all know that delivery service downtown is very stressed. A lot of the delivery vehicles park where they can most of the time. I think this is an effort to maybe preserve what already exists. They already use the existing loading zone by Center and Broad Street. The one in front of the Brotherhood is already being used. It's not marked, but it's already being used. So this basically formalizes it. The biggest concern, and Chief Murphy can talk about this, is that the use of the zone on Broad Street closest to Center Street, if they're not actually in that square that's marked as a loading zone, and they're actually feeding into the or spilling over into the crosswalk in that street, fire has maneuverability issues. I'm making that turn. So I think that was the whole genesis of removing that loading zone. I think this is being kept and expanding the number of loading zones with the understanding that if this is an ongoing issue, that Steve, not me, because I'll be gone, is going to come here and request that zone be removed, because it's continuing to be a problem, and there really needs to be almost no patience at all with that. So that's it's supported by fire, supported by traffic safety, and we'd ask you to approve it.
Thank you.
I'm a little confused now. I'm looking at option 1, and then it says remove the loading zone. Then I'm looking at option 1, relocate loading zone, and there's keep existing loading. So which one are we doing?
Second one.
So I
Which
put
one's
the
being
first,
recommended?
I put the first map in there to show you what your July 19th vote was.
Right.
And it was to remove this
Okay, gotcha.
loading zone here and relocate it here. That work has not been done yet. So
Gotcha.
traffic safety reviewed it again upon the request of somebody in the community. And this is the new recommendation. Keep this now. So that would be reversing your prior vote, and then just changing the time here from from 8 to 4 to 8 to 12. And still moving this crosswalk eventually when it ever gets done.
Does that make sense, Matt?
Now I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, 8 to 12. I got it. And I think the reason for that is the long trucks with the big ramp on the back can run that across the.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a driveway here, so there's no cars that are parked here anytime, and it's easy for them to just slip right in.
Right.
There's a curb cut right there, and then the ramp's not going right to that crosswalk. So moving the crosswalk down to the corner makes a ton of sense.
And I think there was because there was some opposition to the decision we made back on July 10th, and I think there was a group that got together to really try and work through this and come up with this alternative.
And all the businesses are in favor of this in that area.
The interesting sort of, this is there's the town meeting article that's coming. The interesting thing with this, you go back 20 years, there was a sort of an understanding that all the larger trucks, the food trucks, would get out of downtown by noon. On a good day, most of them are out by 11. All the restaurants knew that. They set their orders that way. The guys set their trucks up and delivered that way. That has, over the last 20 years, eroded. That policy and that usage pattern has eroded. Some of it's steamship related, some of it's lack of restaurant association, lack of, sort of keeping it in place. And I think it's an issue. I mean, when you look at them pulling up next to the hub and no one can turn that corner and they're in a no parking space. So there's, this has to be dealt with. Hopefully this will help it, but there also has to be more of a focus on not allowing these guys to park wherever they want and make it up. If we're making these spaces, then they have to follow these spaces. And at some point, if it's continue, in my opinion, if it continues to be kind of the sort of free for all it seems to be a lot of days, I think we should consider going back to sort of big trucks out by noon. Let the little guys in after. Right? We should be thinking along those lines if this doesn't solve it.
So are there two parts to this motion? Reversing the prior decision? It can be one. Okay. Anyone like to make a motion?
I move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Burns.
Yes, thank you. Good luck.
Did we vote all
Thank you,
four of
Mike.
those? Yes. That's a present, Mike. We voted 4 things.
Thank you, Mike. The monthly town management activities report. I won't go through everything listed here, but we have a lot of plans underway, some reports and studies. The sewer master plan is coming up at your March 11th meeting. That's going to be a pretty comprehensive presentation. A lot of meetings happening, budget, Comcast license renewal, which is up in a second. Collective bargaining is well underway, long-term planning, landfill, and lots of other things. We all reported out already on the Mass Municipal Annual Conference. We had a meeting last, I think it was Thursday or Friday, with, pursuant to a grant that we've received for resiliency with historic preservation. A lot of different preservations groups were there. Got a lot of projects underway. Some are listed here as coming before you for updates pretty soon, like the Harbor Master Building. You're going to get an update about the design of that on March 4th. We're working actively on plans to reuse the old fire station. The new fire station had an open house over the weekend. Senior Center, Island Home, we got a lot of work going on with Island Home and looking at possible potential various operational models. Increased parking enforcement, we talked about a little bit earlier. We have, between Ken, myself, and Town Council, we've been talking about the board's October vote regarding a strategy for public beach access, and we have some materials to go over with you at an upcoming executive session. Some of us are spending a lot of time on the plastics ban outreach and public education. Christy has been very involved in that. 2020 town meeting obviously is a lot of prep. The L8 project is underway. We've been talking about the commuter shuttle and some other projects listed there. Personnel-wise, we have filled the Assistant DPW Director for Facilities. That is filled with Mark Foyt. And his position now we are looking to fill. And we've filled the capital projects what's it called? Capital Projects Asset Manager and slashes. What are we calling it? Yeah, okay. It's getting a little bit late for me to remember things, but it's basically somebody who will help oversee the status and progression of capital projects as well as be the Assistant Finance Director. And that is also filled with a gentleman by the name of Rick Sears, who starts next Wednesday. Thank you, Brian. And he will be on island a limited amount of time until he fully moves here later in the spring.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to select board's reports. Number one, we've got the review approval of cable television license agreement with Comcast.
So that is in your packet. I know there is a group of people here. Thank you all for your immense patience to sit through the board meeting. Just a tiny little bit of background, the cable TV license renewal license technically expired in October of 2019. However, if it's not renegotiated and renewed at that time, it just continues in place. There's a very like a 2-year process to renew. There's a lot of public outreach that goes along with the renewal requirements, including something called the ascertainment period, and that involved a survey or ascertainment process. It involved a survey and some other review of various things. And Jason was, I think, our board member that was involved in this. Greg was the staff member that worked on this. He's not able to be here tonight, but he put together the agenda information sheet that's in your packet, which contains a term sheet. And maybe, I don't know, Jason, if you're okay to take us through, or anybody else in the group that might want to do that. One of the biggest achievements, I guess, for us in these negotiations is the increase in the franchise fee from 3% to 5%. So that's really going to help provide funding for PEG and other things we want to be doing with local community television.
This is a couple years in the making, if not maybe 3. It's been a long time. I think that there's a lot of reasons that we want to go to 5% versus 3 that will increase everybody's cable bill, Comcast cable bill, not their internet, but just the cable part. If in the next 10 years that tends to start going down, then that 5% can hopefully cover some of that loss. If we kept it at 3 and there was any trend that's going down, it may or may not happen, but then that would be a loss of revenue for a very vibrant organization that's doing a lot of good things. So that made sense to go to 5. We originally asked for about, I think, $900,000 in capital with Comcast, and we knew that was a little much. No town gets even close to that, but getting 400 was a huge win over, spread out over 10 years. That's really, really big. And then all the
before you go on that, just a question on that. There was 100,000. They were trying to do 100,000 and 1/4%, and you guys got 40,000 a year. You got you for 10 years.
They wanted to structure it a different way.
Yeah, and what was the estimates if they'd structured it their way? How many customers do they have? Yeah, I would like to know. Yeah, I think you're smart to do it the way you did, but I'm just.
Yeah, because it was we've got about 10,000 subscribers,
Okay.
and if subscribers do cut the cable, then we weren't guaranteed that 400,000. Where
Right.
if we did the 40,000 a year, then we were.
Gotcha. So they have about 10,000, so 1/4% was.
Yeah, it worked out to be less than that.
Yeah.
So we just weren't going to take the
Okay.
risk. Yeah.
Right. If we thought it was going to go up the other way, there's a chance we might have would have took that other offer. But
Right.
Comcast knew that. They know their trends. They got their forecasts.
Mhm.
But next thing I was going to say is all the kind of techie things that Jen and Karen and Andrew and Lisa got into, running fiber and this and getting an extra channel. They went back and forth on all these things. They can speak on that if they want, but it was a lot of work to try to figure out all that stuff. I was more of a bystander on those conversations, but that was a big part of it. Is there anything anybody wants to address on that, on the fiber tech side? Like that's a big benefit that you think the board or public needs to know that would understand?
We are getting high def, so that's a really great thing.
So we could potentially have an 8 channel,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
not just an 18.
Not just an 18.
Jen Erickson, this is my 3rd contract. One of the things that really got accomplished was Comcast trying to make their contracts consistent. So it was a huge overhaul to the contracts that Nantucket had ongoing. So we had to it was a lot of looking at every single word and making sure that we kept the presence here of having the office here, that kind of thing. But we were able to really accommodate them in getting their contract consistent with many of the contracts that they have. So that was win for both of us.
What was the benefit with running fiber? And they're allowing us to do that, or they were going to pay for some the school to NCTV 18, so we could go live. We at some point we'll be able to go live.
Within 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, right now the connection that goes from the school to Monomoy to do the broadcast is on regular coax. So, and that was installed probably more than 20 years ago. So by allowing that fiber connection, we don't really do as much out of the school anymore. And if we are doing it, we're doing it with NCTV. They're involved in a lot of those functions. So by having them connect a pretty short connection from existing town cable that goes over to here for these broadcasts, it's a pretty short connection for them to help us connect to the NCTV location, which is right around the corner.
Mm-hmm. You guys were here the whole time, so I wanted you to speak a little bit on the tech side of it.
Well, Karen McGonigal, CTO. I don't really have a lot to add. This was my first contract with the town, and it's been going on almost 3 years because I started when I was still at the school district. So, but I think Jen covered all the important points, unless you have any questions.
My one other question, there was a Form 500 complaint that they have to give us once a year. Do we receive that?
Mm-hmm.
We do.
Yes,
We do get it. And what does it show? Like, my biggest complaint was their latency. You know, I moved to Comcast to clear. This doesn't do with TV, but it has to do with credit cards. And you know, it's gotten a little bit better, but you know, so I know I've complained. If there was a bunch of complaints about that midsummer, you know, for the last couple of years, it would have been me being one of them. And I know a bunch of other businesses that were having trouble running their credit cards through Comcast because they were dropping. So
The one thing I'd like to clarify with this contract, it is television only.
I understand that.
All of that kind of signal is not included.
But
in
it also comes in on the same wire.
It depends on the location. The school has it coming in on different lines.
Right.
The police department, I believe it's coming in on different lines also.
I understand, but for businesses, it's coming in on the same line that I would pull, you know, cable from is what I'm pulling my computer from. So anyway.
I think the complaint form is television only. I don't think I've ever seen anything about internet on there.
They're giving it, that's great, you know, and I just want to make sure that and I know it's about television, but I also think that there's people who have concerns about other uses of Comcast, and I'm glad that they're getting a complaint form. We can look at it. If those continue, I'd like to think that we'll address them.
The other really nice thing that this team, not me, the team, negotiated was the electronic programming. So when you go click on there, you can actually see what's happening in the next 5 or 6 hours. It's a small thing, but we didn't have it before.
Right.
And we had to negotiate that.
Nicely done.
Anything else, Lisa, you want to highlight?
Really, I just want to say thank you for everybody's help putting this together, especially Greg, you ladies. It was great working with you, and I'm glad that we're at the end of it because it's been a long 3 years. So, just thank you.
We'll see you in 7 years when we
Okay.
start again.
Yeah.
Or 6.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you to everyone who's worked on this. It has been a long time, and I really appreciated it. The term sheet is very helpful and looks like well negotiated. So we are looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Okay, committee reports.
Go ahead, Kristen.
I always go first. So plastics, single-use plastics ban, we've been working on more targeted outreach, getting ready for the June 1st implementation. So our last meeting, we were talking about trying to figure out how to get more businesses to participate in an audit. So just saying it publicly that if you're a business or an organization that wants Graham to come in and see how you can comply with the single-use plastics ban, or if you want to just in general get Graham's recommendations on how you could purchase other alternatives, please reach out to her. We're also looking for more filling stations around town and just around the island, indoor and outdoor. So when we're getting rid of the single-use plastic water bottles, we have other options for people to fill up. We have a URL on the town website, so you can, I think it's townofnantucket.gov/water stations, and that will show you where you can refill your water bottles. So we want to make sure we have enough, especially around June 1st. The Complete Count Census Committee's been meeting as well, gearing up for that. We just had our town census, so there was some confusion between the town census and the state federal census, and so we're trying to get as much information out about the differences between the two. We're also going to be having assistance centers throughout March and April and May. So it's on the town website if you go to the Census Count Committee. But basically Stop and Shop Cafe, the Athenaeum, Boys and Girls Club, Food Pantry, Handlebar. We have a bunch of different locations in all different hours, all different days of the week, where you can go if you have any questions about the census or how to fill it out or if you didn't receive it. So we're just trying to get the information out there. And it's all on the website, the town website. So if you guys want to print out this sheet and have it at your business or other places around the island. And then just one comment after listening to Julian Sear and Rep. Fernandez, that they are pushing through the net zero by 2050. And it made me start thinking how we could start thinking about things that we can do locally and what do we want to put on the warrant article for next year to try to get Nantucket maybe by 2040. So just putting it out there.
I got a bunch. Sorry, so I apologize now ahead of time. So last Thursday, I went to an age and dementia-friendly initiative training. There's 3 of these. I happened to go to the second one. I heard of it, went in a little late, and was really, really impressed with the people who were there, and Taylor Hilst, that's our Human Services Director. She is on it, and I can't say enough how impressed I am of her. And I'm just sitting there listening to when our elders are going through dementia and the things that we can do that isn't groundbreaking, just painting, music, small things that we can do and to fire things in their brain and to tell their story. It was really uplifting, and there's one more of these. I would suggest any of you to go to the third one. It was very helpful to think about kind of shining a light on this. And I spoke up during this meeting and said it's not something that we talk a lot about on Wednesday nights. We talk about our island home and the senior center, like really big stuff, but not a kind of this type of aging on Nantucket. And so hopefully that'll be brought up down the road. Were you going to hit BPAC?
You can.
Okay, BPAC today, we talked, Amy Baxter came in, we talked about the micro-mobility, dockless, bike share, and it's probably, we were just kind of giving her advice on things that we would want to see in the MOU. And good thing came out of it is this MOU needs to be very clear of our objectives so we know what to put in the license going forward, right? This is a pilot, right? In an MOU, we need to have that, what do we want in there so we can make the license down the road, whoever it may be, really succeed. So that was helpful. We also made a recommendation and a motion to limit the kind of the pedal assist to 15 miles an hour. And Tom was there and he said that he was already thinking 14, 15 miles an hour. So you can still pedal faster than that, but the assist stops at 15. We thought that was safer. So that was a good discussion. And also there's different levels of acceleration to take off the fastest accelerator. Like, so let's say there's 5 or 4 to take off the top one. So that was good. We also looked at Washington Street and Francis, 4 different options, and looking at through a lens of bicyclists and pedestrians, how to make that the safest and how to push bicycles across that way into the new bike path behind the duck pond, right? And so we're looking at that. There'll be more on that this summer. And I think that was it. We looked at some other stuff. That was BPAC today.
Look at Pleasant Street and the sidewalks, the different options, yeah.
I was involved with the sidewalk group. We haven't met in 6 months, but we met today. And Mary was there from Preservation Trust, and Holly Backus, and Rob McNeil, Mickey, Penn. And to fast forward to the very end was, we need preservation guidelines. Because I got asked, like, what does the select board need? I said, the select board wants to improve the sidewalks. We have capital, we want money, and we want you guys to tell us, like, we'll adopt whatever preservation guidelines you want, and we can figure out where that goes. As HTC, and we can ratify them or support them, but we're not the experts. So we're hopefully going to get more information and consultants and see who does that. Is it NHC? Is it can Holly Backus help us? So it was a good conversation. Took a while to get to the end, but it's heading in the right direction. We didn't get into any really specifics. And the last thing I just thought of was, if we most likely we'll have a new board come April to kind of put this on our radar, to think about our strategic plan, which board members are kind of focusing on which areas. And maybe assign one board member to stay in more contact with the state reps within these areas. Or maybe we just divvy it up. So like if Christie's housing, she's talking to state reps on housing, she's kind of owning that part of the strategic plan, even though we all own it. We kind of did that in the beginning, but I think it kind of fell apart. And so with a new board, I think that we should put that on our radar.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Coastal resiliency met again. Not a lot to report. We went through, so not a lot to report there. One interesting thing though is there's two scientists, Jen Carberg and Megan Boyce, and they have deduced that when you watch the small things at the end of here are the ones that we have trouble with. The ones that people have trouble hearing, they claim that it's the small knob at the end. So I don't, that's a scientific method.
So you're not singling me out. You're saying it's not you, Jason.
It's not you, Jason. It's that was the claim. It hasn't been proven, but that was. And then the other thing, just a sort of general comment. I had a buddy who's trying to bring a son here around July 4th, and the flights from New York are now well over $1,000, 6 months and ahead round trip from New York, because we're so busy. And they know they can get the money. It's almost at the level of, sort of a private plane, commuter. What do you call? Not private. Give me the word.
Charter.
Charter plane.